I want you to put yourself in a very specific and incredibly uncomfortable situation for a second.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. So it's late at night. You've just finished this completely exhausting, bone-crushing day of work. You get into your car and it's quiet.
Yeah, that heavy kind of quiet.
Exactly, almost suffocating. You sit there in the driver's seat, just the faint, sterile glow of the dashboard illuminating your face, and you pull out your phone.
Oh man, I can feel the tension already.
It's bad. With your heart pounding so hard you can actually feel it in your throat, you dial an automated bank line.
Yeah.
You wait through all those robotic, unemotional voice prompts, literally just to hear how close your company's checking account is to absolute zero.
Wow. That is just, it's a completely visceral image. The sheer paralyzing anxiety of that exact moment.
It really is.
Just that feeling that everything you have built, every sacrifice you've made is just about to evaporate.
Yeah. And that was Marcus Sheridan in 2008. His fiberglass pool company, River Pools and Spas, was days, maybe even hours away from total bankruptcy.
Just sitting in his car, facing the absolute, undeniable collapse of his livelihood.
Right. But to save it, he didn't, invent a new product. He didn't secure some massive bailout loan.
No, he did something else entirely.
He uncovered this terrifying statistic about modern buyers, a reality that was basically hiding in plain sight. And I really want to frame this for you, the person listening right now, because this is the core tension we are exploring today.
It's the big question.
Exactly. What if the reason your business is struggling, or I don't know, maybe just plateauing, isn't because of your product or your service?
Or even your team's work ethic, right?
Yeah. What if it's because 70% of your customers' buying decision is already made before they even say hello to you?
Which is just wild to think about.
Yeah.
Because if the vast majority of the decision is happening in the dark, entirely without your input or guidance, then the fundamental architecture of how we've been taught to run a business is broken.
It's totally broken.
The traditional playbooks are not just, less effective.
Yeah.
They're actively working against you.
And that brings us to our mission today. We are doing a deep dive into the introduction and chapter 1 of the book They Ask, You Answer.
Such an important read.
It really is. We're looking at the foundational concepts that triggered this monumental shift in modern consumer behavior. A shift that has completely erased the centuries-old wall between sales and marketing.
Erase it completely.
Yeah. Whether you are a solo entrepreneur, a startup founder, or an executive at some legacy corporation, understanding this shift is no longer optional.
No, you have to get this.
You really do. Learning to view your entire operation as a teaching entity rather than a traditional selling entity is pretty much the only way to intercept your buyers during that crucial window when they are making up their minds in the dark.
And to truly understand how we got to this point, to understand the solution and this massive behavioral shift, we have to examine the catalyst.
Right, the origin story.
Exactly. We have to understand the environment that forced this realization. We basically have to look at the fall.
Let's go back to that origin story. So it's 2008. From 2001 up until that point, this pool company in Virginia was absolutely thriving.
Just crushing it.
Right. They were moving fiberglass pools, expanding their footprint, operating under this very confident assumption that they had a brilliant business model.
As most companies did back then.
Right. But then the 2008 financial crisis hits. The global economy enters a total freefall.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the old reliable methods of generating business, the heavy spends on TV commercials, the radio jingles, massive newspaper spreads, premium placements in the yellow pages, they just completely stop working.
It's like someone pulled the plug.
Literally overnight, the phone stops ringing, the leads just completely dry up.
We really have to look at the macroeconomic psychology of what was happening just prior to that crash.
Okay, let's unpack that.
There is this concept we need to explore here, which is the camouflage of a booming economy.
The camouflage, I like that.
Yeah, because when credit is flowing freely and, home equity is artificially inflated, consumers feel universally wealthy. So money moves with very little friction.
Right. People were financing $50,000 luxury items like fiberglass pools without the intense, agonizing scrutiny that would define the post-2008 landscape.
Exactly. It's that classic saying, right? A rising tide lifts all boats.
Even the ones with massive holes in the hull.
That is the perfect way to look at it. A thriving economy masks the fundamental flaws in your customer acquisition strategy.
Right, because you can afford to just throw tens of thousands of dollars at a Yellow Pages ad.
Yeah, because the sheer volume of willing buyers in the market basically guarantees a return on investment, regardless of how inefficient or unhelpful that ad actually is.
You aren't winning because you're actually answering the customer's needs.
No, not at all. You are winning because money is cheap and abundant. The whole environment was propping up a fundamentally lazy approach to commerce.
I mean, think of a massive power outage in a retail store. When the lights go out and the cash registers stop working automatically, you suddenly have to figure out how to manually do business in the dark.
You're completely exposed.
Exactly. You are forced to rely on foundational truths rather than automated conveniences. And when that economic tide goes out, you suddenly see who is swimming naked.
Oh, for sure.
The 2008 crash wasn't just a financial event, it was a deep psychological trauma for the consumer.
Yeah, it really changed how people think.
When the easy money suddenly evaporates and people are terrified of losing their jobs and their homes, those traditional levers used to pull to get their attention suddenly reveal themselves to be incredibly fragile.
Well, because the nature of traditional advertising, what we call interruption marketing, relies on catching a consumer when they are open to suggestion.
Right.
You interrupt their favorite television show with a flashy commercial, hoping to plant a seed of desire. But when a consumer is in a state of deep financial anxiety, their psychological defenses go way up.
They become hyper-protective of their shrinking wallets.
Exactly. They stop listening to the loud, flashy, interruption-based ads because those ads suddenly feel manipulative.
They don't want a pitch. They want certainty. They basically just want to mitigate risks.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. The economic trauma forced consumers to seek trust above all else.
Yeah.
They started researching obsessively before parting with a single dollar. They needed to ensure they weren't making a catastrophic financial mistake. And this is where the economic catalyst totally collides with the technological
I just
revolution.
have home phone.
Yes, the timing is so critical here. The iPhone launched in 2007. Broadband internet penetration in homes was hitting critical mass.
The perfect storm.
Literally.
Yeah.
Just as the global economy was collapsing and forcing consumers to become hyper-cautious, technology placed the sum total of human knowledge directly into their pockets.
It's crazy to think about.
The intersection of economic anxiety and unprecedented technological empowerment just fundamentally rewired the human buying reflex.
And this is a massive takeaway for anyone listening who is leading a company right now. Do not wait for a global macroeconomic crisis to stress test your customer acquisition strategy.
They don't.
If you are riding high on a booming market, you must actively audit whether you are actually connecting with your buyers or just coasting on a rising tide.
You have to look for the fundamental truths about how your customers are behaving when the friction is high.
Because the behavior that was forged in the fires of the 2008 crisis, it didn't revert when the economy recovered.
No, not at all.
It became the new default setting for the human brain. The consumer realized they held the power. They realized they no longer needed to rely on a salesperson to tell them what was best.
Which brings us to the most jarring reality of this entire paradigm shift.
The big one.
This is the centerpiece of the modern commercial landscape with the 70% rule.
Right.
Recent behavioral studies highlight one specific eye-popping statistic that every single business leader needs to internalize. Today, across almost all industries, an average of 70% of the buying decision is made before a prospect ever talks to the company.
Wait, 70%?
70%.
That is just, we really need to spend some significant time unpacking the mechanics of that. Because it is a staggering number,
Yeah.
but it's really easy to gloss over if we don't dissect what the consumer is actually doing during that vast stretch of the journey.
It isn't just passive browsing.
Right. This is active, aggressive, and highly skeptical investigation. Think about your own behavior. Let's say you wake up at 2 a.m. You can't sleep because your roof is leaking or your company needs new enterprise software or, you are thinking about installing a pool.
Right.
What is the very first thing you do? It's a reflex. You reach for the glowing rectangle on your nightstand. You don't wait for business hours to call a sales representative.
Nobody does that anymore.
No, you open a search engine.
And in that exact moment, the balance of power shifts entirely. Historically, information asymmetry favored the seller.
Meaning they held all the cards.
Yes, the company held the pricing, the specifications, the knowledge of potential pitfalls, the comparisons. The buyer had to cross the threshold of the store or pick up the phone and essentially submit to the seller's narrative just to get that information.
They were the gatekeepers.
Right. The seller controlled the flow of data, which meant they controlled the timeline of the sale.
But that 2 a.m. search destroys that asymmetry.
Absolutely destroys it. During this 70% phase, the buyer is vetting. They are digging into potential problems.
They're searching for highly specific terms like hidden costs of fiberglass pools or why do enterprise software implementations fail?
Exactly. They're reading third-party reviews, they're scouring forums, watching installation videos, and actively looking for reasons to disqualify vendors. They have an expectation, born from that technological empowerment we just discussed, that they can become functional experts on anything they want to master just by using their fingertips.
And here is the truly terrifying part for a traditional business model. This entire process is happening in absolute silence.
Total silence.
It is a secret elimination process. They are visiting your website, looking for specific answers, and if they don't find them, they don't leave a little complaint card. They just hit the back button and go to your competitor.
They are actively disqualifying companies that refuse to participate in their independent research phase.
Yeah.
If your business model is built around the idea of holding your best information back for the face-to-face sales pitch, I mean, if your website just says call for a free quote or contact us for pricing, you are totally invisible during the most critical, vulnerable, and formative part of the buyer's journey.
Wait, hold on. I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because I can hear a seasoned sales director listening to this, and their blood pressure is just rapidly rising.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
If the buyer is doing 70% of the work on their own in the dark, and they are essentially educating themselves into subject matter experts before they even pick up the phone, doesn't that make the salesperson totally obsolete?
That's the fear.
Are we just automating the entire sales profession? Because if the buyer already knows what they want, the salesperson is just an order taker with a fancy title.
It's the most common, visceral fear that sales teams have when they're confronted with this data.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally misinterprets what the buyer's actually seeking when they finally cross that 70% threshold and decide to reach out.
Okay, what are they seeking?
They are not looking for an order taker, and they certainly aren't looking for someone to read them a basic brochure.
Let's map this to something we all experience. Modern medicine.
That's a great comparison.
Right. Because 25 years ago, if you felt a sharp pain in your abdomen, you went to the doctor completely blind. You had zero information.
You just went in and hoped for the best.
Yeah. You sat on the crinkly paper on the exam table, relying on that physician 100% for the diagnosis, the context, and the treatment plan. They held all the cards.
Right.
But today, you do not go to the doctor blindly. You experience the pain, and you immediately dive into a 3-day rabbit hole on WebMD, Mayo Clinic, and Reddit forums.
Oh yeah, everyone does it.
That is your 70% research phase.
And by the time you finally book the appointment and walk into that clinic, you have a highly developed hypothesis about your condition. You have already eliminated certain possibilities in your mind, and you are hyper-focused on a few potential diagnoses.
Exactly. But when the doctor walks into the room, what do you expect from them? You don't want them to start with a basic lecture on human anatomy.
Definitely not.
You don't want them to hand you a generic pamphlet on healthy eating. And you absolutely do not want them to be defensive or dismissive of the research you've done.
No, you'd find a new doctor.
Right. You want a high-level specialist to confirm your accurate findings, correct your misconceptions with empathy, and guide your highly specific, unique case based on the foundation of knowledge you've already brought to the table. You need them for that final 30%, which is arguably the most complex, nuanced, and critical part of the entire process.
That analogy perfectly isolates the evolution of the role. The salesperson is not obsolete. Their baseline of entry has simply moved higher up the mountain.
Higher up the mountain, I like that.
They are no longer the gatekeepers of basic information. They must evolve into high-level consultants. They are the specialists who validate the buyer's research, contextualize it for the buyer's unique environment, and navigate the complex final hurdles of implementation and customization.
But, and this is the absolute kicker, the doctor only gets to see the patient if the clinic was visible, authoritative, and trusted during that 3-day online research phase.
Exactly.
If the patient found all their answers on a competitor's hospital blog, they are going to book their appointment with the competitor.
Precisely. The expertise of the salesperson is utterly irrelevant if the company failed to participate in the first 70% of the journey.
It's so true.
Which forces leaders to ask themselves a very uncomfortable question. If a prospect is 70% ready to buy today, did our company provide the deep educational information that got them there, or did they get it from someone else?
And if you are auditing your digital footprint right now and you realize your website is basically just an online brochure with a list of generic services and a contact us form, you are actively losing revenue in the dark.
You're bleeding out and you don't even know it.
You are failing to provide the curriculum your buyers demand. And the reason most companies fail to provide this curriculum isn't because they lack the knowledge.
No, they have the knowledge.
It's because the internal structure of their organization is fundamentally broken. The people who know the answers aren't the ones building the digital footprint.
Which brings us to the architectural collapse of the oldest wall in corporate history.
The big divide.
The forced eradication of the line between sales and marketing.
Let's dive deep into this friction. Because of this monumental shift in how humans buy, the traditional siloed roles of sales and marketing have become not just outdated, but actively destructive.
Highly destructive.
We are moving from a world where marketing was just a support function to a world where marketing is the heavy lifter of the actual sales process.
To understand the magnitude of this friction, we have to look at the historical dysfunction that has defined these two departments for over a century.
Oh, boardroom drama.
It's real. How have they traditionally viewed each other? Let's look at the dynamics. Historically, marketing was viewed by the C-suite and certainly by the sales team as the arts and crafts department.
Right, the people who make the logos pop and buy the branded stress balls for the trade shows.
Exactly. They were the brand custodians. They managed the aesthetics. They bought the billboard space. They wrote the clever copy. But fundamentally, on the balance sheet, marketing was classified as an expense.
A necessary evil to maintain market presence.
Meanwhile, the sales team was viewed as the engine of the company, the revenue drivers, the closers.
The heroes.
Yes, the rainmakers who actually went out into the world, fought hand-to-hand combat, and brought home the money that kept the lights on.
But this creates a deeply entrenched, toxic dynamic. It creates a hierarchy of respect and compensation that basically poisons collaboration.
Totally poisons it.
Think about the bitter irony of traditional corporate behavior. When a company hits a bad quarter, when revenue dips, what is the very first department to face budget cuts and layoffs?
Always marketing.
Always marketing, because it is viewed as a discretionary expense. And conversely, when a company wants to aggressively grow market share, where do they invest? They hire more sales reps. They increase the headcount of the revenue drivers.
But if we apply the 70% reality to that traditional playbook, it reveals a massive strategic error. It is entirely backward. It is corporate self-sabotage. If the buyer is making 70% of their complex financial decision before they ever agree to speak to a human being, then which department is actually facilitating the majority of the sale?
It's marketing.
It's marketing. Marketing is the department responsible for populating that digital space. Marketing is responsible for the website, the articles, the videos, the deep dive guides that answer the buyer's midnight questions during that silent research phase.
Wow. So to cut the marketing budget when you are struggling for leads is the equivalent of turning off the runway lights while the airplanes are actively trying to land.
That is exactly what it is.
I want to reframe how we visualize this relationship. Forget the old cliched metaphors. Think about this in terms of military strategy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Historically, marketing was treated like a small reconnaissance drone. It flew out, took a quick blurry picture of a target, dropped a pin on a map, and flew back.
It generated a quote-unquote lead.
Right. Then the sales team, the heavily armed, highly trained, specialized unit, was sent in to do all the actual combat. They had to navigate the terrain, identify the hostiles, overcome all the objections, build trust with the locals, and secure the objective. Sales did 99% of the heavy lifting.
Because the environment required them to. The buyer had no independent way to learn the terrain.
Right. But the modern buyer's behavior has completely flipped that dynamic.
Yeah.
Today, the buyer demands that the terrain be fully mapped out before they ever engage.
Right.
So marketing can no longer be a cheap reconnaissance drone. Marketing must become the heavily armored advanced scout.
I love that, the advanced scout.
Marketing has to go in, secure the perimeter, clear out the minefield of objections, build a fortified bridge of trust through exhaustive education, and guide the target 70% of the way back to base.
And the specialized sales unit is only deployed for the final, highly complex extraction. They only engage when the target is fully debriefed, comfortable, and ready to move.
If marketing acts like the old drone, if they just put up a generic landing page, capture an email address, and immediately send the specialized sales unit in to aggressively pitch, The modern buyer treats it as a hostile
I
ambush.
absolutely do.
They panic, they put up their defenses, and they vanish. The operation fails because the advanced scout didn't do the heavy lifting of education and trust building.
The problem, of course, is that the advanced scout marketing cannot build that bridge of trust without the specialized knowledge that is locked inside the heads of the sales team.
That's the catch.
And this is where the theoretical alignment crashes into the messy reality of human ego and corporate politics.
We really have to talk about Krista Kochula here. This story perfectly encapsulates the internal warfare of this transition.
It's such a classic example.
So she was the marketing manager at a B2B company called Block Imaging. They sold refurbished medical imaging equipment, MRI machines, CT scanners. We are talking about multi-million-dollar, highly complex, high-stakes capital equipment.
A classic traditional B2B environment where sales reps are absolute kings.
Exactly. Krista, sitting in the marketing seat, recognizes this tectonic shift. She sees that hospital administrators and radiology directors are going online to research the lifespan of refurbished MRI machines, the hidden installation costs, the maintenance nightmares.
They're doing their 2 a.m. searches.
Right. She realizes Block Imaging needs to produce deep, exhaustive, transparent educational content to capture these buyers during their 70% research phase. But she doesn't know the intricacies of MRI maintenance. She needs the sales engineers. She needs the veterans who have spent 20 years answering these exact questions in the field.
So she goes to the sales team to extract their subject matter expertise. She asks them to help her write the article, to get on camera, to share the knowledge that they normally save for the final closing pitch.
And what happens? She hits a brick wall of ego and commission-based self-preservation. One of the top sales reps looks at her and says something to the effect of, "Krista, this all sounds very exciting. I'm glad you're energized. But because I'm in sales and I need to hit my quota, I'm going to go back to selling now. Good luck with your marketing thingy."
Your marketing thingy.
You believe that?
That phrase is the perfect artifact of a dying corporate culture. It encapsulates the sheer condescension and the profound misunderstanding of the modern buyer.
Oh, completely.
That sales rep viewed marketing as a trivial, tangential activity that had zero impact on his ability to close deals. He believed his charisma, his Rolodex, and his face-to-face negotiation skills were the only things that actually mattered.
He didn't realize that the marketing thingy was the only thing preventing his Rolodex from becoming entirely obsolete. He didn't understand that while he was busy making cold calls to voicemail boxes, his buyers were online, actively looking for the very content Krista was trying to create.
When marketing and sales operate in these isolated adversarial silos, when sales hoards information and marketing is relegated to making things look pretty, the company becomes paralyzed.
They just stall out.
They are physically incapable of meeting the informational demands of the modern buyer. The advanced scout is sent out into the field with no map and no ammunition, and the specialized unit sits back at base, wondering why the targets have stopped showing up.
If you are a leader, a founder, or a manager listening to this is where the rubber meets the road. You cannot solve the 70% reality by simply buying new marketing software or hiring some trendy ad agency.
So we'll fix it.
You have to actively, aggressively demolish the silos within your own walls. You must force your sales and marketing teams into the same room, under the same roof of accountability. They cannot have separate cultures.
No.
They cannot have contradictory metrics where marketing is graded on generic lead volume and sales is graded solely on closed revenue. They must share a single unified mandate, answering the buyer's questions with absolute transparency.
But merging two historically adversarial departments requires more than just a mandate from the CEO. You can't just tell them to work together.
Right, that never works.
It requires a profound psychological shift. It requires a unifying philosophy that redefines the very identity of the company. It requires a paradigm that gives both the marketer and the salesperson a shared, noble purpose.
Which brings us to the ultimate evolution, the teacher within.
Yes.
This is the philosophical core that solves the 70% problem and dismantles the internal silos. The premise is simple to state, but incredibly difficult to execute. To survive the modern commercial landscape, you must stop viewing your business as a selling entity, and you must start viewing it as a teaching entity.
We really have to analyze why this shift in identity is so incredibly potent.
Yeah, let's break it down.
It basically comes down to the fundamental mechanics of human trust and defensive psychology. Think about the posture of a traditional selling organization. When a company's primary identity is "we sell things," Their entire posture is inherently defensive and self-serving.
Everything is a transaction waiting to happen.
Yes, they are guarding their trade secrets. They are hiding their pricing until they can justify it in a presentation. They are maneuvering the prospect through a carefully constructed funnel designed to trap them into a close.
It feels icky.
Because the buyer is not stupid. The human brain is highly evolved to detect when it is being manipulated. The buyer feels that friction. They feel the agenda dripping off every single interaction. They know the company is holding back information to maintain leverage.
It's an adversarial relationship by default. It's like a game of poker where both sides are just hiding their cards.
But when an organization fundamentally embraces the identity of a teacher, the entire dynamic flips. The posture shifts from defensive maneuvering to offensive radical transparency. Well, a teacher does not hoard information to maintain leverage over a student. A teacher's sole objective is to empower the student with as much knowledge as possible so the student can make the best, most informed decision on their own. When a business adopts this posture, it completely disarms the buyer's defensive psychology. The friction just evaporates.
Because the beauty of teaching, as the philosophy outlines, is that its influence has no bounds. It isn't restricted by business hours or the geographic territory of a sales rep.
Exactly.
When a company becomes obsessed, not with how do we pitch our product, but with what is our customer actually thinking, fearing, and asking at 2 a.m., they transform their entire corporate roadmap. They become an engine of radical helpfulness.
It's a complete mindset shift.
Now, I know what is happening in the minds of some listeners right now. We really need to ground this in gritty reality. I can hear the immediate pushback.
But my business is different.
Exactly. Listen, Marcus Sheridan was selling fiberglass swimming pools to suburban homeowners. That's a consumer luxury good. Of course they want to be educated. But I sell highly customized, enterprise-level B2B logistics software. Or I manufacture heavy industrial equipment. Or I run a highly specialized corporate law firm.
Right.
I am operating in a cutthroat, complex, deeply technical market. I am a CEO or a senior partner or a contractor. I am not a college professor. How on earth does sitting around teaching apply to my gritty reality?
It is the most vital distinction we have to make because the word teacher carries all this academic baggage. Being a teacher in the context of modern business does not mean standing in front of a chalkboard delivering abstract philosophical lectures. It doesn't mean becoming an academic institution.
Right.
It means becoming the most helpful, transparent, objective, and exhaustive guide in your specific granular industry. It means recognizing that no matter how complex or gritty your product is, your buyer is still a human being who is anxious, confused, and desperate for clarity during their 70% research phase.
Let's pull a specific, irrefutable example to prove this. Let's look at Mozilla companies.
A perfect case study in the power of this philosophy in a totally non-glamorous space. Mozilla Companies operates in the lifting and rigging industry. They manufacture and sell massive industrial overhead cranes.
You literally cannot get grittier, heavier, or more traditional B2B than overhead steel cranes used in manufacturing plants and shipyards.
Oh, they're all.
This is not a consumer impulse buy.
Exactly. It is a highly technical, multi-million-dollar capital expenditure. For decades, this industry operated purely on relationships, massive catalogs, and guarded pricing structure.
Our old way.
Right. The conventional wisdom would say that a plant manager buying a 20-ton overhead crane doesn't want to be taught. They just want to negotiate with a veteran sales rep over a steak dinner.
Sure.
But the CEO of Mozilla, Tony Mozilla, recognized the shift.
Huh?
He realized that the modern plant manager or the young procurement officer tasked with researching cranes was exhibiting the exact same 2 a.m. Google reflex as the person buying a swimming pool.
They are terrified of making a multi-million-dollar mistake that could get them fired. Or worse, cause a catastrophic safety failure on the factory floor.
Precisely. They had massive, complex questions like, what is the true cost of maintaining a gantry crane versus a job crane? Or what are the hidden safety compliance issues with imported steel cables? Why do hoist motors burn out prematurely?
Very specific questions.
Tony Mozilla realized that if his company wasn't answering these questions publicly, the buyer was going to find someone else who would. So he embraced the identity of the teacher. He didn't just ask his sales team to try harder. He fundamentally restructured his company's output. He hired a full-time content manager. He hired a videographer. in the lifting and rigging space.
They committed to being the curriculum.
They systematically extracted the knowledge from their veteran engineers and sales reps, and they started producing incredibly detailed, highly technical, brutally honest articles and videos answering every single question their industry was secretly asking. They tackled pricing models, they compared their own equipment to their competitors' equipment objectively, they even discussed the reasons why someone might not want to buy from them. They transformed from a company that just sold cranes into the ultimate, indispensable educational resource for the entire global lifting and rigging industry.
They illuminated the dark 70% of the buyer's journey, and the results speak for themselves. By committing to this radical transparency, by becoming the definitive teacher in a gritty industrial space, they saw their sales revenues increase by nearly $20 million in a remarkably short period.
It's incredible.
Because when a buyer spends weeks consuming your curriculum, watching your engineers explain safety protocols, and reading your transparent breakdowns of cost, who do you think they trust when it's time to sign the multi-million-dollar purchase order?
They trust the teacher.
Always.
The company that educated them wins the right to sell to them. Trust is the ultimate currency of commerce, and teaching is the most efficient way to mint that currency at scale.
But it's not just about complex B2B manufacturing either. We can look at how this philosophy completely disrupted one of the most notoriously distrusted consumer industries in existence, the used car market.
The quintessential example of adversarial, information-hoarding sales culture.
Right. For generations, the used car industry was built on the exact opposite of teaching. It was built on obfuscation.
Oh, yeah.
The dealer knew the true condition of the car, they knew the actual margin, they knew the hidden flaws, and the buyer knew absolutely nothing. The entire sales process was a high-pressure, manipulative game of haggling designed to exploit the buyer's lack of knowledge.
It was an industry that essentially weaponized information asymmetry.
And then CarMax entered the arena and looked at the modern consumer. They realized that buyers didn't just dislike the haggling process, they were deeply traumatized by it.
People hated it.
They were terrified of buying a lemon. They felt incredibly vulnerable because they didn't understand the mechanics of the vehicle or the convoluted financing structures. So CarMax decided to become the teacher in a space dominated by hustlers. They completely changed the rules of engagement.
They removed the friction by removing the asymmetry.
Exactly. They introduced fixed, non-negotiable pricing. They provided exhaustive, transparent vehicle histories before anyone even asked. They created a no-pressure educational environment where the sales consultants were paid the same flat fee regardless of which car the customer bought.
That's huge.
Right, because they removed the financial incentive for the salesperson to manipulate the buyer into a more expensive vehicle. They educated the consumer on the exact condition of the car, the exact cost, and the exact financing terms. They didn't just sell cars, they guided the buyer through a transparent curriculum of purchasing a vehicle safely.
And by acting as a trusted guide, by prioritizing education and transparency over the quick adversarial close, they built an absolute empire. They proved that even in an industry defined by sleaze, the company that embraces the teacher within will dominate because they are aligning with the deep psychological needs of the modern risk-averse buyer.
This really requires a total rewiring of how you view your daily operations. If you are leading a team or building a company, your primary objective when you wake up in the morning is no longer just closing deals.
No, that is the byproduct.
Right. Your primary daily objective is creating the educational infrastructure, the digital roadmap, the deep dive articles, the objective comparison videos, the transparent pricing calculators. These are the tools that empower your customers to make highly informed decisions without you. You have to be the curriculum, because if you refuse to provide that curriculum, you are essentially forcing your buyer to enroll in your competitor's school.
The era of holding information hostage to force a conversation is permanently over. The modern buyer has zero tolerance for friction and infinite access to alternatives.
Let's bring all of this together. We have traversed a massive shift in human behavior today. The survival and scale of a modern business depends on a profound structural shift in corporate identity.
It's adapt or die, really.
It is. We have seen that the old economy, the one propped up by easy credit, artificial abundance, and loud interruption advertising, allowed companies to be lazy gatekeepers of information. You could hold all the cards close to your chest, and the buyer had no choice but to come to your table on your terms to play the game.
But the intersection of economic trauma and technological empowerment flipped the board completely.
Yeah.
The buyer now holds the cards.
The new economy is absolutely ruthless to gatekeepers, but it is endlessly rewarding to teachers. Because your buyer is making 70% of their critical financial decisions in the dark without ever speaking to a human being, your only hope of survival is to ensure that your business is the light guiding that silent research.
Beautifully said.
When you embrace the teacher within, you don't just tear down those toxic, century-old silos between your sales and marketing departments. You eliminate the defensive friction between you and the person trying to give you their money.
You transition from being an adversary trying to extract value to being an indispensable ally, helping them navigate complexity. And in a digital landscape that is deafeningly crowded with noise and aggressive pitches, the trusted ally is the one who wins the business every single time.
You know you have to be the teacher. You know you have to map the terrain for a buyer who is actively doing 70% of the heavy lifting without you.
You've got to build the curriculum.
But theory is easy until it gets uncomfortable. What happens when your buyers start asking the questions that make your board of directors sweat?
The hard ones.
What happens when they demand to know your hidden flaws? When they ask you to objectively compare yourself to your biggest rival, and when they demand to know exactly, down to the penny, how much you cost? Next time on the deep dive, you'll have to decide. Do you actually have the courage to answer the exact questions your entire industry is terrified to talk about? So, it is January 2009, and I want you to just picture this 31-year-old business owner sitting alone in his car, just staring out the windshield into the dark.
Oh man, that is a bleak image right from the start.
It really is. He is dialing his bank's automated phone line, navigating that clunky robotic menu just to check the balance of his company's checking account.
Which is always a terrifying experience when things are going bad.
Completely. And when the voice on the other end finally reads the number, it confirms his absolute worst fear. The account is overdrawn.
Just gut-wrenching.
Yeah, and it hasn't just dipped into the red today, right? It has been overdrawn for 2 solid weeks.
Oh, wow. 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So he sits there in the cold. He actually starts to cry. And he realizes he has to walk inside and look his family in the eye.
That is heavy. I mean, the pressure there is just unimaginable.
Right. And he knows his employees are sitting at home because there's literally no work. His credit is entirely destroyed. And the high-priced consultants he hired are basically telling him to just file for bankruptcy, walk away, and let the company die.
Which is the standard advice, just cut your losses.
Exactly. You go inside, you look your family in the eye, and you realize you have 2 choices. You can follow conventional wisdom and fold, or, well, you can do something so radically counterintuitive to standard business practice that it feels like active self-sabotage.
And that choice right there, that pivot point, is phenomenal. Today in this deep dive, we are exploring what happens when a company chooses that self-sabotage and, in the process, accidentally changes the trajectory of modern marketing forever.
The promise we are making to you today is a big one. By the time we wrap up this discussion, you will understand a shift in consumer behavior so monumental that it essentially renders traditional sales tactics completely obsolete.
Right, because we are looking at the foundational narrative of this specific philosophy, focusing on the collapse and rebirth of a company called River Pools and Spas. We are going to examine the exact historical moment when the dividing line between sales and marketing was just erased forever.
You are going to see why clinging to the old way of doing things is just a fast track to irrelevance. And you will learn the insanely simple framework this owner used to capitalize on the shift.
And for anyone listening, understanding this shift isn't just some academic exercise. I mean, it is the literal difference between thriving in the modern digital economy and being left behind like an absolute relic.
Yeah, we are talking about survival here, adaptation.
Exactly. It is a complete paradigm shift in how an organization views its buyers. And it requires unlearning a whole lot of deeply entrenched corporate habits.
So let's establish the baseline. We need to look at the fall and what the source material calls the false economy. It's 2001. Our business owner, Marcus Sheridan, has just graduated from West Virginia University.
Good old WVU.
Right. And like a lot of recent grads, he doesn't have some grand master plan to, dominate the fiberglass swimming pool industry.
No one really plans for that, do they?
Not usually. So he takes a job near Washington, D.C., and immediately runs into the soul-crushing reality of D.C. commuter traffic.
Oh, that traffic will break you. It is awful.
It broke him. He realizes he is just profoundly miserable.
He hits that early career wall, right? where the reality of the daily grind just entirely eclipses all that theoretical ambition you have in college.
Yeah, so he and his wife decide to pivot. They move back to their hometown area in Virginia's Northern Neck. Now, two of his friends, Jim Spies and Jason Hughes, had recently started a small swimming pool company, River Pools and Spas.
Okay, so this is where it begins.
Right, and they needed someone to run their retail store while they were out in the field doing the actual physical pool installations. So Sheridan agrees to do it temporarily.
Temporarily.
Hmm.
Famous last words.
Exactly, because 6 months later, he becomes a third partner in the business. And from 2001 to 2008, they operate inside this wild artificial bubble.
The false economy. This is such a crucial concept. To understand why the eventual fall was so devastating, we have to look at the macroeconomic climate of that specific era.
Right, the early 2000s.
Yeah, the early to mid-2000s represented a period where money was essentially frictionless. I mean, the housing market was inflating rapidly, credit standards were notoriously loose, and banks were handing out home equity loans with almost zero due diligence.
It was the wild west of lending.
It really was. So during this time, the barrier to securing a $50,000 loan for a luxury item, like a swimming pool, was incredibly low.
Which seems like it would create a very dangerous illusion of competence for a business owner, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you are selling a high-ticket item and your customer can just walk into a bank and get the cash with a signature and a pulse, you aren't really testing your sales process. You are just taking orders.
You nailed it. That is the core danger of the false economy. It masks a highly fragile foundation. The business model at River Pools wasn't necessarily built on profound consumer trust or some unbreakable value
It
proposition.
was just floating.
Yes, floating on a massive tide of easy consumer credit. If the salesperson could generate just enough desire for a pool, the financial friction was entirely removed by the banking sector.
So think about building a massive, beautiful mansion on top of a sinkhole.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Right. You are the architect, and you're walking around admiring the crown molding and the structural integrity of the roof. You think you're an absolute genius because the house looks incredible, but you are completely blind to the fact that the easy credit, the water underground, is slowly eroding the limestone beneath the foundation.
And you just keep painting the walls.
Exactly, you keep painting the walls, completely ignoring that the soil is washing away. Which makes me wonder, how often do businesses mistake a favorable economic tide for their own brilliance?
Oh, all the time. It highlights a deeply ingrained cognitive bias in leadership, attribution bias. When a company is growing 20% year over year, the executive team almost universally attributes that success to their own internal brilliance.
Of course they do. We're amazing. Look at our numbers.
Right. They think their strategy is flawless, their marketing is genius, their sales team is elite. They rarely stress test the model by asking, well, what percentage of this growth is actually just a byproduct of a historically anomalous macroeconomic tailwind?
They assume the environment is neutral and their skill is the variable.
Well, they assume the environment is a constant. They don't recognize that the environment is actually doing the heavy lifting. When the economy is roaring, businesses just don't ask the hard questions about customer loyalty or brand resilience.
Because the phone simply doesn't stop ringing.
Exactly. They confuse a rising tide for their own ability to swim.
Which brings us to a really harsh reality check. By midsummer of 2008, River Pools is operating under this exact illusion.
They thought they were invincible.
They did. They have 2 full months of pool installations backlogged. The calendar is packed, and they are projecting the most profitable year to date. Then, September arrives.
The ground finally gives way. The sinkhole collapses.
Lehman Brothers collapses. The global financial system seemingly freezes in a matter of days. And the localized immediate impact on this small pool company in Virginia is just staggering. Within 48 hours of the crash, 5 separate customers who had put down deposits for winter installations called to cancel.
Because the panic in the broader economy instantly paralyzed the consumer.
Right.
If we look at the unit economics here, a typical fiberglass pool installation at that time was running around $50,000.
Okay.
So 5 immediate cancellations means $250,000 in booked revenue evaporated over a single weekend.
$250,000. Just gone.
Poof.
And the spiral didn't stop there either. The leads dried up, the credit markets locked down, meaning even if someone wanted a pool, they couldn't finance it anymore.
The frictionless money was gone.
Gone. By December, they were forced to send their installation crews home because there was literally no work to be done. And by January 2009, we arrive back at that cold car.
The overdrawn account.
The overdrawn account and the bankruptcy consultants telling Sheridan the math simply no longer works.
So the takeaway for you, the listener, right here is about structural integrity. A business model must be anchored to sustainable consumer trust, not just contingent on favorable economic weather.
Because favorable conditions are a season, they are not a foundation.
Brilliantly said. When the external liquidity dries up, when the easy credit vanishes overnight, the only mechanism that keeps a company breathing is the genuine, irreplaceable value it provides.
And the unshakable trust it has accumulated with its audience.
Exactly. If your survival relies heavily on your customer having frictionless access to disposable income, your model is highly, highly vulnerable to systemic shocks.
So hitting that absolute rock bottom forced a moment of terrifying self-reflection for Sheridan. The old playbook, the one built on the false economy, was burning to the ground. And this shift in reality leads us directly into the second big idea, the massive shift in buying behavior and the total blurring of the line between sales and marketing.
Facing absolute ruin, Sheridan takes a hard look at his lead generation. Because historically, they relied on traditional outbound levers.
Like what?
Full-page ads in the yellow pages, local radio spots, direct mail campaigns, television commercials.
The classic old school stuff.
Yeah, the legacy playbook. But suddenly, those channels were completely dead. They were hemorrhaging precious capital on advertising and seeing zero return.
Because the internet had fundamentally rewired how humans sought information, right?
Yes, the world had changed under their feet, and the legacy playbook was failing catastrophically.
So there is a statistic in the source material that serves as the hinge for this entire philosophy. Today, on average, 70% of the buying decision is made before a prospect ever initiates contact with the company.
That is a staggering number, 70%.
Let's pause on that. Wait, if 70% of the decision is locked in before they even fill out a contact form or pick up the phone, what are they actually doing during that time?
They are aggressively mitigating risk. A buyer in the digital age isn't just casually browsing. They are conducting defensive research.
Defensive research, I like that term.
Yeah, they are looking for the catch. They are reading reviews. They are scouring forums, comparing specifications, and actively searching for the reasons why they should not buy your product.
They want to be talked out of it.
Sort of, yes. The internet has armed the consumer with asymmetric information. They no longer need a salesperson to educate them on the features. They need the internet to protect them from making a poor financial decision.
And the source text gives a phenomenal real-world scenario to back this up. It blew my mind. River Pools actually began selling multiple swimming pool projects, each worth over $100,000 without ever setting foot in the customer's homes prior to the sale.
Just let that sink in.
Six-figure construction projects bought with the same remote friction as ordering a pair of headphones online.
When you really digest the implications of that 70% statistic, it forces a complete restructuring of the corporate org chart. I mean, historically, marketing was treated as an auxiliary function, an expense center.
Right, they handled brand awareness, designed the brochures, managed the trade show booth.
Exactly. And sales, on the other hand, was the revenue engine. Sales closed the deal.
The heroes of the company.
Always. But if the buyer is traversing 70% of the funnel in total silence, relying solely on digital content to make up their mind, well, that traditional boundary dissolves. Marketing is no longer just generating awareness. Marketing is actively executing the sale.
Okay, I see where you're going, but I'm stuck on a massive contradiction in corporate behavior here.
Lay at me.
If the data definitively proves that marketing is doing 70% of the heavy lifting, why is the corporate world still operating like it's 1999?
It is a great question.
I mean, when a company hits a recession or misses its quarterly targets, the marketing budget is almost universally the first thing slashed. Meanwhile, they immediately start recruiting more account executives to try and brute force their way out of the revenue slump. Why is there such a huge disconnect?
It comes down to perceived safety and, honestly, financial panic. When a CFO looks at a spreadsheet during an economic downturn, marketing just looks abstract.
Oh, it looks like a luxury.
Yeah, it looks like a gamble on, brand equity and impressions. A salesperson, however, carries a quota. And a quota looks like a mathematical guarantee.
Even though we all know it's not.
It's a completely false guarantee, obviously. But psychologically and financially, it feels safer to invest in a human who promises to close deals than in a content strategy that promises to educate silent buyers. It is a legacy mindset deeply entrenched by a century of business school doctrine.
So it's prioritizing the illusion of control over the reality of how people actually buy.
Precisely. I mean, this is exactly that. It's an institutional refusal to surrender control of the narrative. But look at the organizations that recognized this shift early and leaned into it.
Who comes to mind?
Well, the source mentions a couple. Think about Zappos in its early days. They recognized that the primary friction point for buying footwear online wasn't the price. It was the fear of the shoe not fitting and the hassle of returning it.
Right, buying shoes online used to be terrifying.
So they didn't hire more salespeople to convince people to buy. They changed the operational rules by introducing free, no questions asked return shipping. They mitigated the risk.
Oh, that makes total sense.
And CarMax did the same thing. They analyzed the used car market and realized consumers universally despise the adversarial high-pressure negotiation process.
Everybody hates the used car lot experience.
So they eliminate it entirely with transparent, no-haggle pricing.
They neutralized the buyer's anxiety before the buyer even arrived on the lot. So for you listening to this, the practical application here requires a fundamental reframing of your digital assets.
Your website, your articles, your videos.
Yes, they cannot just be static digital brochures anymore. You must architect them to function as your elite 24/7 sales team. This content never sleeps, it never asks for a commission, and it definitely doesn't get demoralized.
Never.
Its entire purpose is to systematically qualify prospects, educate them, and dismantle their anxieties while you are sound asleep.
And if your content isn't proactively answering the objections that normally kill deals in the boardroom, well, your content is failing.
Which naturally brings us to a massive psychological roadblock. Because if the math is this clear and the 70% statistic is a proven reality, then theoretically every executive on earth should be aggressively pivoting their strategy toward radical transparency.
They should be.
So why aren't they? The source material says it's not just stubbornness, it's ego. Business owners are infected with this delusion that their specific industry is somehow exempt from fundamental human psychology. This is what we call the "we're different" fallacy.
Oh, this is arguably the most pervasive and destructive psychological trap in all of business.
Really? The most destructive.
I mean, yes. Whenever a consultant or a strategist introduces a philosophy based on radical transparency, like, publishing your entire pricing matrix online or publicly dissecting the flaws of your own product,
Yeah.
the immediate visceral reaction from leadership is outright rejection.
Because it feels like handing your playbook to the enemy.
It feels incredibly vulnerable. The source text shares a brilliant anecdote about this, actually. So Marcus Sheridan travels extensively, speaking to thousands of business leaders across every conceivable sector.
Okay.
And during his keynotes, he consistently poses one specific question to the audience. He asks, how many of you, by a show of hands, believe your business is quite different from the rest of those in the room?
And let me guess, every single hand goes up.
Every single time. 100% participation.
That is wild.
Nobody ever sits in that audience and thinks, you know what? My sales cycle and customer anxieties are functionally identical to that manufacturing firm over there. Everyone is fiercely convinced that their operational model is a unique snowflake.
It's like a teenager, right? The teenager thinks their heartbreak is completely unique because they've never felt it before. A 15-year-old slams their bedroom door and screams, "You just don't understand me. My life is completely unique."
Yes, perfect analogy.
When in reality, they are navigating the exact same hormonal shifts, social hierarchies, and identity crises that literally every human being has navigated for millennia.
We just desperately want our struggle to be special.
Exactly. A CEO thinks their sales cycle is unique because they built it from scratch or because their product has a proprietary patent. But the underlying mechanics of the transaction, the buyer's fear of loss, the need for validation, the avoidance of risk, those are completely identical.
The psychology driving this resistance is deeply tied to professional pride. Founders and executives have poured decades of sweat equity into building their companies. To concede that their complex, highly engineered sales dynamic is fundamentally driven by the same basic human emotions as the local landscaping company, well, it feels dismissive of their hard work.
So they construct defensive rationalizations.
Exactly. They say, sure, radical transparency works if you're selling swimming pools to suburban homeowners, but I am in B2B enterprise software.
Oh, I've heard that one.
My buyers are procurement committees. My sales cycle is 18 months long. My industry is different.
But how does this actually play out for a company selling proprietary B2B software where the pricing genuinely is bespoke? If I public my pricing model online, my competitors will just undercut me in 24 hours. How is radical transparency not just corporate suicide in that specific scenario?
Let's dissect that because it's the most common objection by far.
Gotcha.
First, the idea that your competitors don't already know your pricing is usually a total myth.
Oh, they definitely know.
In any established industry, competitors have a very tight range on what you charge. But more importantly, let's look at the buyer psychology. When a procurement manager is researching enterprise software and they hit a wall where the pricing is hidden behind a "Contact Us for a quote" button, what do they think?
They probably get annoyed.
They don't think, oh, it must be highly customized. They think, this is going to be incredibly expensive, and I am about to be forced into a high-pressure sales funnel just to get a baseline number.
Right. It creates immediate friction and suspicion.
Yes. So the transparent approach isn't necessarily publishing a static menu of prices if your product is truly bespoke. The transparent approach is writing an exhaustive article explaining exactly how your pricing is calculated.
You detail the variables.
Yes. You say if you need X integrations, it drives the cost up. If you have Y volume, it drives the cost down. Our typical engagements range from $50,000 to $150,000, and here are the specific factors that dictate where you fall on that spectrum.
Ah, so you aren't just giving them a rigid number, you are teaching them how to buy the product intelligently.
You are equipping them to advocate for your solution internally. You are mitigating their fear of the unknown, because whether you are B2B, B2C, selling industrial machinery, or selling consulting services, you are ultimately dealing with human beings.
Human beings who just don't want to mess up.
Right, whose primary directive is to avoid making a career-ending or financially disastrous decision. The fundamental currency of every single transaction is trust.
So for the listener, the immediate mandate here is to brutally audit your own ego. You have to strip away the industry jargon, the complex sales funnels, and the perceived uniqueness of your organizational structure.
It's all just a shield.
Yeah. At the end of the day, a buyer is a human being with a problem, and they are terrified of making the wrong choice. Stop using the "we're different" narrative as a crutch to justify opaque business practices.
Once you accept that your buyers demand transparent information regardless of your industry, the path forward becomes remarkably clear.
And that clarity leads directly to our next key idea, the discovery and definition of the core philosophy. Once you drop the defensive posture and accept that your buyers are starving for unbiased information, how do you actually operationalize that trust? How do you deliver it?
So we return to 2009. Sheridan is staring into the financial abyss. He decides he has to master the internet to generate leads for his failing company.
What else is he going to do?
Right, so he dives into the prevailing literature on digital marketing, and he immediately hits a massive wall of specialized jargon.
The marketing sector is notorious for gating basic concepts behind complex terminology.
It really is. He's trying to save his business, and he's reading about inbound methodology, content syndication, SEO algorithms, and lead nurturing matrices. It's incredibly dense.
This is a word salad.
But he possessed a massive structural advantage. He didn't have an MBA,
Wait, that was an advantage.
a huge one. He wasn't burdened by classical marketing theory. He looked at all of this highly sophisticated digital strategy purely through the lens of a desperate, panicked consumer.
That is fascinating.
That lack of formal indoctrination was his greatest asset. It allowed him to bypass the academic theory and distill everything down to its absolute essence. He translated the entire ecosystem of digital marketing into one, almost embarrassingly rudimentary directive.
Which was?
Just answer people's questions.
Just answer people's questions.
That's it.
I mean, it sounds too simplistic to base a corporate turnaround on, frankly.
It does sound simple, but he realized that river pools didn't need to transform into a sophisticated media agency. They didn't need to win industry awards for clever copywriting or brilliant graphic design. They simply needed to become the ultimate, undisputed teacher of fiberglass swimming pools in the world.
We really need to properly define this philosophy, which is called "they ask, you answer," because it feels like it could be frequently misunderstood.
It is deeply misunderstood. It is not a blogging strategy. It is not a social media tactic. It is a fundamental organizational obsession.
It's an obsession.
Yes. It requires aligning every department, sales, marketing, customer service, executive leadership, around a singular focus, obsessing over what the customer is thinking, what they are searching for late at night, what they are anxious about, and what they fear. You take those precise questions and let them dictate your entire business model.
Okay, I need to push back on the scope of this, though. Because there has to be a limit. I can hear business owners listening to this right now and just hyperventilating.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Is there not a massive material danger in answering every single question? What if the customer asks a question about a scenario where our product objectively fails? What if they ask why our direct competitor is 20% cheaper? Are we genuinely supposed to broadcast our weaknesses and essentially arm our prospects with reasons not to buy from us?
This is the crux of the entire philosophy. And
Mm.
honestly, it's why so few companies actually execute it properly.
Because it's scary.
It is terrifying. But yes, you are supposed to answer those exact questions, the most terrifying ones. Because you have to accept the harsh reality of the digital age. Consumer ignorance is no longer a viable business strategy.
Let's unpack that. If consumer ignorance is no longer a strategy, that implies that the entire traditional sales methodology, holding back the price, obscuring the flaws, controlling the flow of information until you have them in the room, that is actively destroying trust rather than building it.
It absolutely destroys trust. Think about the mechanics of a modern search query. If your product have a flaw, or if your service is significantly more expensive than the market average, the consumer is going to discover that fact.
Oh, 100%.
The architecture of the internet guarantees it. They will find a Reddit thread, they will read a third-party review, they will watch a YouTube teardown, or they will simply look at your competitor's comparison chart. The only variable you actually control is who educates them about that flaw.
And if they find out from a third party, you just look deceptive?
You look like you are hiding the ball. And the moment a buyer feels you are withholding critical information, trust just evaporates. But consider the alternative. True teachers do not hide the flaws of their subject matter. They educate impartially.
That is a huge shift in identity.
It is. When a business proactively publishes an article detailing exactly who their product is not a good fit for or why they are more expensive than the alternative, the psychological impact on the buyer is profound. You completely disarm them. You neutralize their defensive posture.
It's the ultimate pattern interrupt. The buyer is bracing for a heavily biased sales pitch, and instead, they get objective clinical education. So the practical mandate for the listener here is a total shift in corporate identity.
Shift your identity from seller to teacher.
Yes. You must stop viewing yourself as a vendor whose job is to persuade and start viewing yourself as a fiduciary teacher whose job is to impartially educate. If your customer is asking a question in a sales meeting, you must answer it completely and publicly on your platform before your competitor beats you to it.
Because if you refuse to answer the question, the buyer doesn't just stop asking it. They hit the back button and find a company that respects them enough to give them the truth.
But, theoretical philosophies don't save bankrupt companies.
No, they don't. Execution does.
Right. It is wonderful to declare, oh, we will be the teachers, but how did a stressed out, nearly bankrupt pool company actually operationalize this overnight with essentially zero marketing budget?
Yeah.
This brings us to the execution phase, the midnight brainstorming execution.
The operational reality of this pivot is fascinating because of just how unglamorous it was. The visual is striking.
Set the scene for us.
It's late at night, long after business hours. His house is asleep. Sheridan and his partners are sitting around a table. They're physically exhausted. They're staring down the barrel of personal bankruptcy, but they commit to a massive, completely unfiltered brainstorming session.
See, they didn't hire a digital agency to conduct market research. They didn't convene expensive focus groups. They simply relied on their own institutional memory.
Which is free.
Right. They took out paper and systematically wrote down every single question, every objection, and every fear they had ever heard from a prospect over the last decade. Every hostile question about pricing, every concern about fiberglass cracking, every detailed comparison to concrete pools, they just emptied their brains onto the table.
Gathering the questions is only the first step, though. The execution is where the model really proves its worth. They systematically began writing articles and recording highly rudimentary videos to answer every single item on that list. And the specific methodology they used is critical here.
How so?
They didn't use clever marketing copy for the titles. They didn't try to optimize for corporate branding or sound fancy. The titles of the blog posts were the exact questions the customers asked, verbatim.
So, how much does a fiberglass pool actually cost?
Exactly. Or what are the biggest problems with fiberglass pools? Fiberglass versus concrete, which is better?
They mirrored the exact syntax a panicked consumer would type into a Google search bar at 11 p.m.
Yes. Furthermore, the depth of the answers mattered. They didn't just write a fluffy two-paragraph summary to satisfy a search engine algorithm. They provided exhaustive, comprehensive explanations. But above all, the tone was paramount.
Because they wrote without bias.
Yes, their sole, unwavering obsession was educating the reader, focusing on the buyer's fears, issues, and worries. They phrased the content exactly how a normal human being would discuss it, completely devoid of corporate PR speak.
Okay, but how do you actually get a sales team to participate in this? Because we are hardwired to talk about how great we are. Writing an exhaustive article validating a customer's worst fear about your product just feels counterintuitive. It feels like professional self-sabotage to spend hours detailing why our product might, I don't know, fade in the sun.
It feels like self-sabotage right up until the moment you analyze the psychological judo of admitting a flaw.
Psychological judo, I love that.
Think about it. Let's say you publish an article titled, "The Top 5 Problems with Fiberglass Pools." You are intentionally addressing the elephant in the room that your competitors are desperately trying to ignore.
Right.
When a prospective buyer who is already worried about those exact problems reads that article on your site, something remarkable happens. They think, well, if this company is willing to be this brutally honest about their own shortcomings, I can absolutely trust them when they tell me about their strengths.
Wow. You earn the right to sell your advantages because you were honest about your disadvantages.
Exactly. You essentially bypass the entire skepticism phase of the traditional sales funnel. By the time that prospect finally calls you, they don't view you as a salesperson trying to extract money from them. They view you as the trusted consultant who helped them navigate a complex decision.
That is the operational power of the strategy. It transforms the inbound lead from a hostile skeptic into a trusting student.
It changes everything.
So, listener, your immediate actionable takeaway from this deep dive is a literal homework assignment based on the text. Before this week is over, convene your team. Or, if you are a solo founder, just sit down with a notebook today.
Do it today.
Conduct your own midnight brainstorming session. Do not leave the room until you have documented every single question, every quiet fear, and every aggressive objection you have ever fielded from a potential buyer. Write them down using their exact phrasing.
Exactly as they ask it.
And then make it your company's primary mission to answer every single one of them publicly. Build your entire digital footprint around those answers.
Because if you commit to that, you permanently alter the power dynamic in your favor. You stop chasing leads, and you start attracting students.
Let's synthesize the arc of this entire discussion as we wrap up. We've explored the fragility of the false economy, the profound reality of the 70% buying shift, the ego-driven trap of the "we're different" fallacy, the liberating philosophy of the teacher, and the unglamorous reality of midnight execution. When we step back, what is the single unifying thread running through all of this?
The macro theme that connects every point we've discussed today is that the era of leveraging consumer ignorance is permanently over. We operate in a fundamentally transparent, hyper-connected digital landscape.
The soul of this chapter is that consumer ignorance is dead.
It is dead. You can no longer rely on a buyer simply not knowing their options, and you can no longer hoard data and wait until you have them trapped in a conference room face-to-face to control the narrative. The power has irrevocably shifted to the buyer.
The companies that win the digital age, whether they sell backyard installations or complex enterprise software, are those that stop hiding behind the illusion that they are different.
Yes, they embrace the reality that radical, unbiased teaching is the absolute fastest and most resilient path to securing unshakable consumer trust.
It is ultimately about surrendering the illusion of control to gain something infinitely more valuable: unassailable credibility. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the origins of a business revolution. We've traced the journey from the depths of despair in a parked car to the realization that transparent education is the ultimate growth strategy.
It's a paradigm shift that demands a lot of courage, but the math is undeniable.
It certainly is. But we want to leave you with a forward-looking thought to challenge your current strategy. Now that you know you have to answer their questions, well, what happens when the questions they are asking are the exact ones you are most terrified to answer? Like exactly how much you cost or who your biggest, most aggressive competitors are?
Yeah, if you accept that 70% of the buying decision is finalized before they even speak to you, ask yourself this one final thing. When a potential customer is sitting in their living room, silently researching your product's most glaring flaw tonight at 2 a.m., will they hear the honest educational answer from you, the trusted teacher? Or will they hear it from your competitor?
Imagine you're trapped in a horror movie. Like, you know the setup, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. The classic wood scene.
Exactly. You're running through the dark woods, you find this old abandoned cabin, and you just sprint inside. You lock the heavy wooden doors and you go hide in the absolute darkest closet you can find
Right.
because you are terrified of the monster outside. But, and here's the massive twist, hiding in that closet is actually what kills you.
It's the worst place to be.
It is. The only way to survive this particular movie is to stop running, unlock the front door, turn on all the lights, and literally invite the monster in for coffee. You have to actively lean into the exact thing that terrifies you.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly the ultimate counterintuitive survival strategy.
Mhm.
And it actually happens to be the exact framework for saving a dying business.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, but we spend so much of our professional lives, trying to construct this flawless, bulletproof corporate facade.
Yeah.
We hide the flaws in our products. We dodge the aggressive pricing questions. We just completely gloss over the drawbacks.
We basically run from the monster.
Exactly. But what we're looking at today is the absolute reality that this facade-like, the hiding itself, is exactly what is destroying our sales.
So what if the very questions you are terrified your customers will ask, like the ones you desperately try to avoid, are actually the secret to saving your business from total collapse?
It's a huge paradigm shift.
Right. Today, we are dismantling that facade. You're about to learn the origin story of the they ask you answer philosophy, which was actually born out of the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, when a literal bankrupt swimming pool company discovered this radical approach to survival.
And we're going to explore why this matters for literally anyone in business, entrepreneurship, or, sales today. Because the line between sales and marketing has completely vanished.
It really has.
And becoming the ultimate, radically transparent teacher in your space is basically the only way to survive the demands of the modern digital consumer.
It's a monumental shift. And to really understand the gravity of it, I think we have to start with a statistic from the text that, frankly, should trigger a complete restructuring of how most companies operate.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the data shows that today, on average, 70% of a buying decision is made before a prospect ever talks to a company.
Wait, 70%? Like 7-0.
7-0, yeah.
I have to stop you there because that sounds impossibly high. Are we saying the traditional sales team is basically obsolete?
Well, no, not obsolete.
Because I know plenty of companies, like big, successful companies, that still rely entirely on their top-performing closers to drive revenue. If the decision is 70% made before the prospect even picks up the phone, what is the sales team actually doing?
Right. I get why that sounds crazy. But it doesn't make the sales team obsolete. It fundamentally changes their role from being the gatekeeper of information to being more of an expert consultant.
Okay, a consultant.
Yeah. Let's look at the mechanics of how people actually buy things today. Think about the cognitive friction involved in the old model. 20 years ago, if you wanted to know the price of a service or like the different tiers of a product, you had to call a salesperson.
You had no choice. The company held all the cards.
Exactly. But today, the internet has completely democratized information. So when a buyer encounters hidden information, say a website that just says call for pricing, their brain experiences an immediate spike in cognitive friction.
Oh, I hate that. Call for pricing is the worst.
Right. It causes this tiny spike in cortisol, the stress hormone, because you instantly assume they're hiding something or that the process is going to be this difficult, high-pressure situation.
So instead of calling, they just hit the back button on their browser. They go find the competitor who actually gives them the dopamine hit of immediate, transparent information.
Exactly. I mean, picture this. They're sitting on their couch at 2 a.m. in their pajamas, doing deep research on their smartphone.
We've all been there.
They're reading reviews, they're watching YouTube teardowns, comparing specs on Reddit. They are basically building a mental profile of who to trust. So by the time they actually fill out a contact form or walk into a showroom, they aren't looking for a basic pitch.
Right. They already know your product.
They are 70% of the way there. They just need you to validate the final 30% of their specific, nuanced concerns.
Okay, I hear that, but I'm looking at my own industry, or imagining a listener who works in enterprise tech.
Sure, the big B2B deals.
Yeah. We sell multi-million-dollar software. It takes 6 months to close a deal. It involves security reviews, board approvals, RFPs. You can't honestly tell me that a statistic about consumer online shopping behavior applies to a complex corporate procurement cycle.
You'd be surprised.
I mean, surely a B2B business-to-business tech company is fundamentally different from a a local guy selling swimming pools.
That right there.
Yeah.
That is the exact defense mechanism the author talks about. It is the biggest psychological barrier in business today.
Really? Thinking your business is different.
Yes. The author calls it the "we're different" fallacy. And it is fascinating because every single business owner genuinely believes their industry is the special exception to the rule.
Well, I mean, it's human nature to want to feel unique, right? We want to believe our specific problems are uniquely complex.
Right, of course. But let's break down the psychology of the B2B buyer you just mentioned.
Okay.
The CEO or the procurement manager who is buying that multi-million-dollar software, they're still a human being. When they leave the office at 5 p.m., how do they behave?
I go home.
Right. They go home, they pull out their phone, and they research their personal purchases, like a new car, a vacation, maybe a lawnmower, and they do it extensively online.
Right. They want all the specs before they buy.
Exactly. They demand transparent pricing, they rely on peer reviews, they absolutely refuse to be kept in the dark. So what is the underlying logic that makes us assume that the second this same human being walks back into the office on Monday morning, their entire psychological wiring just resets to 1995?
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Right. Why would they suddenly want to be kept in the dark, denied pricing information online, and just schmoozed by a salesman over a steak dinner?
That is a brilliant point.
Uh,
The human brain doesn't have a B2B mode and a B2C mode. We are conditioned by our everyday consumer habits.
exactly.
If I expect Amazon to tell me exactly when a $20 book will arrive, I'm absolutely going to expect a software vendor to tell me exactly how their product integrates with my current tech stack before I agree to a meeting.
Spot on. The procurement cycle might be longer. There might be, more zeros on the check. But the fundamental currency is exactly the same, and that's trust.
Yeah.
And in the digital age, trust is earned through transparent education long before the handshake. But here's the cognitive dissonance. If 70% of the decision is driven by the digital footprint, the articles, the videos, the transparent answers, who is actually doing the heavy lifting of the sales process?
It's the marketing department, or, well, whoever is creating that digital content.
Right. But look at traditional corporate behavior. When a company struggles financially, what is the very first department they lay off?
Oh, they cut marketing every time. It's almost a reflex. Cut the ad spend, fire the content writers.
Right. And when they want to aggressively grow revenue, what do?
They hire more salespeople. They say, we need more boots on the ground. We need a bigger bullpen.
Exactly. Which proves they're operating on a completely broken, outdated model. If marketing, specifically educational content, is driving the first 70% of the sale, firing marketing to hire more sales reps is like firing your entire offensive line in football to hire more wide receivers.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
It doesn't matter how good the receivers are if the quarterback is getting sacked before he can even throw the ball. You have to stop trying to find reasons why new consumer behaviors don't apply to you.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually. But realizing you aren't different and that the 70% rule applies to you is really only the first step. To actually understand the mechanics of how you leverage this, we need to look at a real-world stress test.
We do. We really do.
We need to look at a company that was forced to adapt not out of some, clever foresight, but out of absolute terrifying desperation.
And this brings us to the actual origin story of the they ask, you answer philosophy.
Yeah.
And to understand it, we kind of have to rewind the clock and look at the macroeconomic environment of the Great Recession.
Right. 2008, the financial crisis,
Mm.
just a brutal, industry-destroying time. The source material focuses on a company called River Pools and Spas, which was co-owned by the author Marcus Sheridan.
Yeah.
And we need to set the scene here because this wasn't just a slight dip in revenue. This was a catastrophic collapse.
Yeah, let's look at why the pool industry in particular was obliterated. In the years leading up to 2008, the housing market was just this massive bubble. People were basically using their homes like ATMs.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They were taking out second mortgages and home equity lines of credit to finance luxury purchases. And what is one of the biggest luxury purchases you can add to a home?
An in-ground swimming pool.
Hmm.
So the industry was thriving on this artificial debt-fueled economy.
Exactly. The author refers to it as the false economy. During that time, business was relatively easy. River Pools was doing what every other successful local business did at the time. They were relying heavily on traditional outbound advertising.
Just to ground this for the listener, when we say outbound advertising, we're talking about the traditional interruption model, right?
Correct. Outbound marketing is when you push your message out to a broad audience, hoping to interrupt someone who might just happen to be interested. It's renting someone else's audience.
like TV commercials, radio spots.
Exactly. Direct mailers and those massive expensive spreads in the Yellow Pages.
Oh my gosh, I remember the Yellow Pages. Businesses literally competed on who could have the biggest ad or who could start their company name with the most A's just to be listed first.
Absolute plumbing.
Yes, it was all about outspending the competition for visibility, not necessarily out-educating them.
Precisely. And in a booming economy, it worked well enough to mask the inefficiencies. But then the subprime mortgage crisis hit. The credit markets completely froze almost overnight.
The money stopped flowing.
Suddenly, homeowners couldn't get a loan for a pool. The ATM was literally shut off. And river pools saw their leads completely dry up.
The scene in the book is incredibly visceral. It's late January 2009. Nobody is buying fiberglass swimming pools in the dead of winter during a global financial meltdown.
No.
And the author, Sheridan, describes sitting in his car in his driveway late at night. He's dialing the bank's automated phone system, waiting in the dark for the robotic voice to read out the company's checking account balance.
And the automated voice tells him the account is overdrawn. Not just a little low, but severely overdrawn for weeks on end.
Oh man, that's heavy.
The psychological weight of this is immense. I mean, they had employees sitting at home with no work, families relying on them. They were staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy.
They were preparing to lose their business, their personal homes, everything.
It was rock bottom.
So in that moment of complete despair, they can't afford to run radio ads anymore. They can't afford the Yellow Pages. The old tools are just completely taken away. And that restriction actually breeds an epiphany. But what's crucial here is that Sheridan didn't invent some complex new marketing algorithm. He just observed his own behavior.
Yeah, this is the turning point. He looked at how he, personally, was solving problems. When he was worried about a topic or needed to research a product, he wasn't looking for a billboard.
No.
He wasn't waiting for a direct mail flyer. He was going to the internet. He was typing his fears, his questions, and his problems into a search engine.
The internet was democratizing information. The old model was so asymmetrical, the salesperson had all the pricing and specs, and the buyer had to submit to a pitch just to get that info.
Exactly.
But now the buyer could become their own salesperson simply by searching.
And Sheridan realized that if this is how he behaves, well, this is how his potential pool customers must be behaving. The solution wasn't to outspend the competitors on flashy ads. The solution was to out-educate them.
Wow.
If people were turning to search engines with their questions, river pools just needed to be the company providing the most honest, thorough answers.
It's like my horror movie analogy from earlier, but let's look at it like a survival scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are desperately lost in a dense, freezing forest. You are starving, it's getting dark, and you are frantic. You start gathering twigs and vines and tree sap, trying to build this incredibly complex MacGyver-style flare gun, thinking it's your absolute only hope to signal for rescue.
Right.
You are completely failing, exhausting yourself on this complex solution. And then you suddenly reach into your pocket and realize you have a fully charged GPS with a satellite beacon.
That is a perfect analogy. The complex flare gun is the expensive, manipulative, outbound marketing campaign.
Yeah.
The fully charged GPS is simply providing clear information. It was hidden in plain sight because the business world was so culturally conditioned to rely on the old way of doing things.
The answer was so simple it almost sounds naive. Just answer people's questions.
Right.
But that realization fundamentally shifted their identity. They realized that to survive, a modern business owner cannot just be a vendor. You must become a teacher. You have to willingly give away the knowledge that your industry traditionally hoarded.
And the mechanism behind why this works is profound. When you educate a buyer, you aren't just giving them facts. You are systematically lowering their anxiety. You are reducing that cognitive friction we talked about earlier.
Okay, yeah.
When a buyer feels understood, and when their specific fears are addressed calmly and transparently, they naturally attach their trust to the source of that information.
Okay, so the philosophical epiphany makes perfect sense. But having an epiphany in your car at midnight is great for a memoir translating I should be a teacher into a tactical strategy that prevents the bank from foreclosing on your house the next morning is a completely different challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
So how did they actually physically execute this without a marketing budget?
Well, this is where the ask you answer transitions from a nice idea into a rigorous business system. It starts with an absolute, unyielding obsession with the customer's mindset. It is not about writing what you want to talk about. It is about identifying exactly what the customer is searching, feeling, and fearing.
Right, because most companies do content marketing entirely wrong. They think, oh, we need a blog. Let's write an article this month about our company picnic, or let's write a press release about our new software update.
Yes.
It's completely company-centric. Nobody is at home Googling your company picnic.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that standard marketing techniques, like developing buyer personas, often fail because they just don't go deep enough into the psychology of the search.
What do you mean?
Well, a persona like marketing manager Mary or CEO Steve is too abstract.
Hmm.
To execute this philosophy, you have to understand the literal phrasing a customer uses when they are stressed. You have to adopt what the author calls a moral obligation to educate the consumer.
A moral obligation. I like that. It means you owe it to your buyer to give them the unvarnished truth so they can make the best decision for themselves, even if that decision ultimately means they don't buy from you.
Exactly.
So let's walk through the exact tactical execution Sheridan used. It started with what he calls the kitchen table brainstorm.
Picture this. It's late at night. Sheridan sits down at his kitchen table with a blank piece of paper. He mentally reviews the past decade of his life selling pools.
Okay.
He thinks about every single conversation he's had in a customer's living room, every question he's answered over the phone, every objection he's faced in the showroom, and he just starts writing.
He writes fast and furious. In 30 minutes, he generates a list of over 100 questions. Things like, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? What are the problems with fiberglass? How does fiberglass compare to a concrete pool?
And the most critical constraint in this exercise is the phrasing. He didn't write down the questions using industry jargon. If a customer asked, why do fiberglass pools pop out of the ground? He wrote exactly that. He didn't sanitize it into a corporate title like Understanding Hydrostatic Pressure and Optimal Aquatic Receptacle Installation.
Yes, because if a customer is asking you a question face-to-face using specific words, you can guarantee they are sitting on their couch typing those exact same words into Google.
Exactly. This touches on the mechanics of search engine optimization, or SEO. Google's algorithm doesn't care about your corporate jargon. Google's entire business model is based on matching a user's specific intent with the most relevant, clear answer. These specific conversational queries are known as long-tail keywords.
Let's define that for the listener because it's a huge tactical insight.
Sure, a short-tail keyword is broad, like swimming pools. If you try to rank your website for swimming pools, you are competing against Wikipedia, massive national brands' news sites.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right, it's nearly impossible, and the intent is totally vague. The person searching might just want to look at pretty pictures of pools. But a long-tail keyword is highly specific, like, how much does a fiberglass pool cost to install in Richmond, Virginia?
Ah, and the person typing that long phrase has massive purchase intent. They aren't looking at pictures. They literally have their checkbook out, metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. By using the customer's literal questions as the exact titles of their articles and videos, Riverpools was systematically capturing all of that high-intent, long-tail search traffic.
That's brilliant.
They were intercepting the buyer at the exact moment of their highest anxiety and providing a calm, thorough answer.
But let me push back here on behalf of the listener because I can just feel the exhaustion setting in.
Okay, let's hear the pushback.
Imagine you're the listener right now. Let's say you run a local roofing company. You've been in the industry for 15 years. You are a seasoned pro. You have answered the question, should I get asphalt shingles or a metal roof? Roughly 4,000 times in your life.
Right, a classic question.
You've answered it in the freezing cold. You've answered it on the phone. You've answered it in emails. The idea of now having to sit down and write a comprehensive, unbiased essay on this topic, isn't that just exhausting? Why add that massive undertaking to an already incredibly busy schedule?
It is a significant undertaking up front, for sure. But we have to completely reframe the concept of exhaustion here. Let's look at your roofing example. Yes, you have answered that question 4,000 times. You have spent hundreds of hours of your life repeating the exact same information one-on-one to 4,000 individual people.
Yeah.
That is exhausting. That is highly inefficient.
Right. You are trading your finite time to educate one person at a time.
But if you take the time to write it down once, to create a deep, thorough, honest piece of content comparing asphalt to metal roofs, you fundamentally change the physics of your business. You take that knowledge out of your brain and you build a teaching machine.
A teaching machine.
That article now sits on your website and answers that question for you perfectly without getting tired, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can answer the question for 1,000 people simultaneously while you are sleeping.
It cures the exhaustion. You are delegating the repetitive education to your digital footprint.
Exactly. And when you do finally talk to a prospect, you aren't starting at square one explaining what an asphalt shingle is. The prospect has already read your article. They are pre-educated.
They are 70% of the way there.
Yes. The sales conversation completely shifts from a basic pitch into a high-level consultation about their specific roof.
Okay, I love that reframe. So if a listener wants to build this teaching machine, where do they start without getting totally overwhelmed?
You start exactly where Sheridan did. You conduct your own kitchen table brainstorm. You sit down with your sales team, your customer service reps, basically anyone who talks to the public. And you make a list of the top 25 questions you get asked every single day.
And you use their exact words. You don't sanitize it.
Crucially, you don't sanitize it. And when you sit down to answer them, whether you are writing an article, recording a podcast, or just shooting a video on your phone, you must provide a deep, unbiased, and thorough explanation.
Wait, what do you mean by unbiased? Because obviously I want them to buy my product.
This is where most companies fail at this philosophy. If someone asks you to compare your product to a competitor, and you write an article that basically says, "We are the best, they are terrible," the consumer's radar goes off instantly.
Oh, absolutely.
The human brain is highly attuned to bias. We recognize when someone is holding back information or, spinning the truth. The moment the buyer senses bias, the cognitive friction spikes and the trust is just broken.
But if you give them a comprehensive, objective answer, like if you actually acknowledge the scenarios where your competitor might be a better fit, or even acknowledge your own product's shortcomings.
The trust skyrockets. It is a psychological disarming technique. By sacrificing a small amount of short-term persuasion, you gain a massive amount of long-term trust.
Which brings us to a massive pivot point in this philosophy. Because answering the easy questions is fine. What colors does your product come in? How long does shipping take? Do you offer a warranty? Every company on earth is happy to answer those questions.
Oh, yeah, they love those.
But what happens when the questions get negative? What happens when the customer starts asking about your hidden fees, your past failures, or why your biggest competitor is 20% cheaper?
This is where the rubber meets the road. How a company handles negative questions reveals their entire corporate culture.
Yeah.
The source material contrasts two radically different ways businesses handle fear in the marketplace.
Yeah.
On one side, you have what the author calls ostrich marketing. On the other side, you have the CarMax effect.
Let's start with the ostrich, the old myth that an ostrich buries its head in the sand when a predator approaches. But I want to upgrade our analogy here. Ostrich marketing isn't just hiding.
Okay, how so?
It's like discovering a leak in the bottom of your boat while you're out at sea. Instead of fixing the hole or even telling your passengers about the hole so they can help bail water, you just take a nice rug and throw it over the leak.
That's a great mechanical analogy.
You look down, you don't see the water anymore, so you feel a lot better, your anxiety goes down. But the reality is, the boat is still sinking. The customer is the water. The water is going to find the hole whether you point it out or not.
That's perfect. And yet, this is exactly how 90% of corporate marketing departments operate. The psychology of ostrich marketing is deeply rooted in institutional denial.
Denial, yeah.
Companies genuinely believe that if they don't bring up the negatives, if they don't explicitly mention the high price or the known bugs in their software release, or the fact that a competitor has a feature they lack, then the customer simply won't find out about it.
Which is absolutely delusional in the modern era.
It is entirely delusional. We have to reiterate, consumer ignorance is dead. If your product has a flaw, or if it is the most expensive option on the market, the customer is going to find out. The architecture of the internet basically guarantees it.
If you hide the price, they will find the Reddit thread where 10 people have posted their invoices. If you hide the software bugs, they will watch the YouTube teardown video where a reviewer completely exposes them.
Exactly. And here is the core mechanism of why ostrich marketing destroys sales. If a customer is researching your product, and they have a concern about durability, and they search your website and find nothing, they don't just stop caring.
Right. They don't say, oh, well, it's not on their website. I guess I'll just buy it blindly and hope for the best.
No, they leave your site, and they go find a competitor or a third-party reviewer who will talk about it. And when they find that source, who is actually willing to honestly address the negative question, who do they inherently trust?
The transparent one.
Right. The company that threw a rug over the leak or the company that handed them a bucket and showed them the hole.
They trust the transparent company every single time.
No.
The company that addresses the fear controls the narrative.
Which perfectly transitions us to the exact opposite of ostrich marketing, and that's the CarMax effect.
Yes.
CarMax is arguably the greatest modern case study in completely leaning into buyer fears and using transparency to revolutionize an entire industry.
And we have to pause and think about the specific industry they operate in. Is there any industry in America with a worse reputation for trust or a higher baseline of consumer anxiety than the used car industry?
Oh man, no. It is the gold standard for high-friction sales environments. If you poll 1,000 people and ask what words come to mind when they think of buying a used car, the answers are universally negative.
Sleazy.
Yep. High pressure, lemons, haggling, sharks, buyer's remorse. It is an industry historically built entirely on asymmetrical information and consumer fear.
The traditional dealership model is essentially an adversarial sport. You walk onto the lot, and the salesman's goal is to extract as much money from you as possible, while your goal is to lose as little money as possible.
It's a battle.
They use the four-square method. They go back to the mysterious manager's office to crunch the numbers. They hide the actual value of your trade-in. It's exhausting.
It really is.
So most dealerships just play the ostrich. They put up giant inflatable gorillas, they shout on the radio about crazy weekend blowouts, and they pretend the fear doesn't exist until they get you trapped in that little glass office.
But CarMax looked at that landscape. It did something completely radical. They didn't just try to put a friendlier marketing spin on the same old toxic process. They actually sat down and broke down the universal fears of buying a used car one by one.
Okay.
And then they built their entire corporate infrastructure specifically to eliminate those fears.
This is where we see the transition from just marketing tactics to a core business philosophy. Let's unpack the specific fears they identified and the structural solutions they built.
Sounds good.
Fear number one, arguably the biggest, is I hate haggling. I hate negotiating with a slick salesperson who does this every single day because I know I am going to get ripped off.
Right. So the CarMax solution, no haggle pricing. The price you see on the sticker on the window is the exact price you pay, period. No negotiation, no manager in the back room.
And the mechanism behind why that works is that it immediately diffuses the adversarial relationship. The salesperson isn't fighting you for a higher commission, they're just facilitating your purchase.
Exactly. Fear number two. What if they're selling me a lemon? What if they polished up a car that was in a flood and the transmission literally falls out 3 miles down the road? In the old days, you just had to trust the guy in the plaid suit.
Yeah, which no one wanted to do. So the CarMax solution was an intensive, standardized 90-point visual and mechanical inspection process.
And they didn't just do it in secret.
Right. They made the quality control a visible part of the marketing. They pioneered providing the vehicle history report right there on the dashboard. They eliminated the information asymmetry.
It's brilliant. And fear number three, which is probably the most lingering fear in any major purchase, buyer's remorse. What if I make a mistake? What if I spend $20,000, drive it home, and realize tomorrow that I actually hate the car?
Well, in a traditional dealership, once you sign the paperwork and drive off the lot, that car is yours. If you bring it back the next day, they practically laugh at you.
But the CarMax solution, a 5-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee.
This is the part that truly blows my mind, because the source material shares this incredible anecdote about just how militantly CarMax enforces this guarantee. It's not a gimmick with fine print.
No, not at all. The story perfectly illustrates the absolute commitment to eliminating fear. A man goes to CarMax and buys a Porsche, a high-end, extremely expensive sports car.
Okay.
He goes through the process, signs the papers, and takes it home.
Okay.
A few days later, well within the 5-day window, he drives the Porsche back onto the lot and says he wants to return it.
A returned Porsche. So the manager comes out expecting a major mechanical failure, like the engine is knocking, the transmission is slipping. But what is his actual reason?
He tells the manager that his dog didn't like it.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he said his dog couldn't get comfortable in the passenger seat of the sports car.
His dog didn't like the Porsche. In any other dealership in the world, the manager would laugh him off the lot. They would say, "Sir, a canine comfort issue is not a valid mechanical defect covered under our return policy."
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
But CarMax didn't argue. They didn't try to pressure him into trading it for an SUV. They didn't try to negotiate. They looked at the policy. 5 days, no questions asked.
Wow.
They accepted the return, took the keys, and 4 days later, the man received a full refund check in the mail.
That is an astonishing level of commitment to transparency, and you just have to imagine the internal boardroom meetings when CarMax first proposed this model. The text notes that their competitors in the traditional auto industry initially laughed at them.
Oh, they thought CarMax was committing corporate suicide. You can't sell used cars without haggling. You'll lose your shirt on the return policy. The salespeople will revolt.
But look at the historical outcome. Who is laughing now? CarMax became the rule makers of the industry. They set an entirely new standard for trust and consumer expectation.
Yeah, and all those competitors who laughed, the
Yeah.
ones who clung to the "we're different" fallacy and ostrich marketing, they eventually had to change their own business models, adopt no-haggle pricing, and offer transparent vehicle histories just to survive. They became the rule followers.
Because the consumer demanded it. Once the consumer tasted a fear-free, frictionless buying experience, they fundamentally refused to go back to the sleazy lot.
Exactly.
The baseline of trust was elevated forever. And this isn't just about the auto industry. The text briefly nods to other massive disruptors who operated on this exact same wavelength.
Yeah, look at Zappos in the early days of e-commerce. People were terrified to buy shoes online because they couldn't try them on. What if they don't fit? What if the color's wrong? The friction was way too high.
So what did they do?
Zappos didn't run a clever ad campaign. They instituted a policy of massive, free, 365-day returns. They structurally eliminated the fear of buyer's remorse, and it built a billion-dollar empire.
Or look at Uber. The universal fear of getting into a taxi in a new city was that you might get scammed on the route, or worse, get into a car with a dangerous stranger.
Right. Huge anxiety there.
Uber didn't just market themselves as friendly taxis. They structurally eliminated the fear by implementing transparent GPS tracking, upfront pricing, and a two-way rating system.
In every single one of these cases, the core strategy was identical. Identify the friction, identify the fear, and proactively dismantle it. This raises the most important question for any business leader listening right now.
Yeah.
Look at your own industry. Look at your own company. Are you hiding from the fears of your marketplace, or are you dismantling them?
So let's make this incredibly practical for the listener. Your homework, your actionable takeaway from this deep dive, is to develop a healthy relationship with fear. You need to sit down with your team this week and make a list of every single reason someone would not buy from you.
Yes. Write it down.
What are the known flaws in your product? What are the risks of implementation? What are the most common objections your sales team hears but your marketing team ignores? Write every single one of them down.
Be brutal about it.
And then ask yourself the hard structural question. How can you evolve your content, your communication, and even your business model to eliminate every single one of those fears transparently?
Because if we pull all of these threads together, the 70% rule, the desperate pivot of river pools in 2008, the kitchen table brainstorm, and the radical transparency of CarMax, the ultimate synthesis of this chapter is undeniable.
Which is?
Consumer ignorance is no longer a viable business strategy.
It's dead. You simply cannot build a sustainable business relying on what the customer doesn't know.
Exactly. When you finally stop hiding from the tough questions, when you abandon the ego-driven "we're different" fallacy, and when you commit to being the most transparent, honest teacher in your industry, you fundamentally change the psychological dynamic of the sale.
Yeah.
By addressing the elephant in the room, by leaning into the negative questions your competitors are terrified to touch, you systematically eliminate buyer fear. And when fear is eliminated, the only emotion left is trust. And in a digital landscape where information is infinite, trust is the only true currency of modern business.
Wow. When fear is eliminated, the only emotion left is trust. That is a really powerful summation. It brings us right back to our horror movie.
Oh yeah, the closet.
When you finally stop running, when you turn around, open the door, and flip on all the lights, you realize it wasn't a monster out there at all. It was just your customer looking for an honest answer.
Right.
And the company that has the courage to give them that answer wins the business.
Every single time.
Now, if you're tracking with us, you understand the overarching philosophy. You know you need to obsessively answer your buyers' questions. But you are probably wondering, with thousands of potential questions out there, exactly which questions should you answer first?
Right, where do you start?
Where do you focus your energy to get the highest return on trust? Well, next time we are going to reveal the big five, the 5 specific universal topics that drive consumer research in every single industry, including the one terrifying topic almost every business completely refuses to put on their website, and why finally talking about it could generate millions. You really won't want to miss it.
Imagine for a second
Uh,
that you are out for this really highly anticipated evening. You've just sat down at like a gorgeous, dimly lit luxury restaurant.
oh, right. The kind of place where you're really trying to make a brilliant impression.
Exactly. Maybe it's an anniversary or, maybe you're hosting this crucial prospective client. The ambiance is just perfect. And the waiter glides over and hands you this beautiful, heavy, leather-bound menu.
You know it's serious when the menu is heavy.
Oh, totally. So you open it up and the descriptions are just mouth-watering. You're looking at a dry-aged, bone-in ribeye with like a cognac peppercorn reduction.
Sounds amazing.
Right. Or you see this wild-caught Alaskan salmon over a bed of truffle risotto. It all sounds incredible. But as your eyes scan to the right side of the page where the numbers should be, there is just blank cream-colored paper.
Oh, no.
Yeah. There are absolutely no prices listed anywhere on the entire menu. What is your immediate visceral reaction in that moment?
I mean, total panic. My heart rate would literally spike. I'd be sitting there trying to maintain a poker face, but internally I'm doing emergency math.
Exactly. You don't sit there thinking, wow, what a value-based establishment. They must really want me to just focus on the rich culinary history of the truffle risotto without the distraction of money.
Right. Absolutely not.
No. You assume you can't afford it. You assume you're being set up. You basically assume the moment the bill comes, you're going to be completely humiliated.
It feels like a trap.
It does. And
Ah.
the anxiety of that unknown, it completely ruins the entire experience. Now, take that exact feeling, that spike of defensive anxiety, and apply it to the internet
Oh, that happens all the time.
all the time. Why do 90% of non-e-commerce businesses do the exact same thing to their customers online? You are on a company's website, credit card in hand, ready to make a decision. And they actively hide the one piece of information you actually need.
Yeah, they bury it. They completely obfuscate it. They throw up these walls of corporate jargon about like synergy and bespoke solutions.
And it triggers the exact same reaction as that restaurant menu. It brings up what I like to call the F word of the internet, which is frustration.
A very powerful F word in business.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. In this deep dive, we are exploring a massive tectonic shift in how businesses must communicate if they want to survive in the modern era. We're looking at this concept known as the Big Five, the 5 core topics that drive almost all consumer research online.
Which is such a crucial framework.
It really is. But today, we are zooming in squarely on the undisputed heavyweight champion of those 5 topics, which is pricing and cost.
Because it is the absolute core of the buyer's journey. I mean, if you don't get this right, honestly, nothing else you do in marketing or sales actually matters.
Right. And whether you're just a curious consumer trying to understand the psychology behind why websites are built the way they are, or, you're a seasoned entrepreneur trying to figure out why your sales pipeline is drying up, understand this concept of pricing transparency is critical.
It's not just a gimmick.
Exactly. It isn't just some marketing tactic to get more clicks. It is the ultimate,
Yeah.
undeniable shortcut to building unbreakable buyer trust, establishing massive authority in your market, and generating measurable revenue.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dive into the deep psychology of why hidden prices destroy trust. We're going to systematically dismantle the 3 biggest excuses businesses use to justify hiding their prices. We'll look at a real-world $6 million case study that proves this works.
That's a great story, by the way.
It's incredible. And we'll tackle the unique friction of complex B2B sales. And finally, we will hand you the exact step-by-step playbook to implement this in your own life or business tomorrow morning.
To really grasp the gravity of this, I think we have to start with the foundational framework of modern consumer behavior, right?
Yeah.
Which is the Big Five. Through, thousands of hours of analyzing search data, website analytics, and buyer behavior, this very clear pattern has emerged. No matter what a person is buying, whether it's a $20 kitchen gadget, a $50,000 swimming pool, or, a $2 million enterprise software system, they obsessively research 5 specific subjects before they ever speak to a human being.
And those 5 subjects are?
Costs, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best in class.
Okay, so money, what's wrong with it? how it stacks up against others, what other people say, and who's the absolute best.
Exactly. If you open up a new tab right now and just look at your own recent search history, I guarantee you will see these exact patterns. You look up how much something costs, you look up the negative issues or problems associated with it, you compare brand A versus brand B.
Oh, we do it constantly.
We all do. You read reviews from other people, and you search for the best option in a specific category. This is really how the human brain mitigates risk.
It's our survival mechanism for the digital age, basically. We're just trying to protect ourselves from making a bad decision.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But here's the massive disconnect, like the great paradox of modern business. While consumers completely obsess over these 5 subjects, the vast majority of businesses actively and intentionally ignore them in their public-facing communication.
Which makes no sense.
None! They refuse to write about them, they refuse to make videos about them, and the most glaring, the most damaging omission of all is always price.
It's wild to me. Businesses will spend $50,000 on a brand new, beautiful website. They'll have drone footage of their office.
Yeah.
They'll have headshots of their team looking off thoughtfully into the distance.
And with their arms crossed, right?
Yes, and they'll have hundreds of blog posts about industry news that nobody cares about. But you search for a dollar sign anywhere on the site, and you get absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So break down the psychology of that moment for me. When a buyer hits that wall, when they cannot find a price, what is actually happening in their brain?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the frustration we feel in that moment is not just about a lack of convenience. It's not just, oh, this is annoying. It is a deeply psychological breach of contract.
A breach of contract. How so?
Think about the modern consumer mindset. We have been conditioned by the internet to believe that information is a basic human right. We feel a profound sense of ownership over our time and our money.
Absolutely.
So the moment we are on a website and we realize that the company absolutely knows the price, but they are actively choosing to withhold it from us, the dynamic shifts instantly. We no longer view them as a helpful resource. We view them as an adversary.
Because we know they know. It's not like the business owner doesn't know what they charge.
Yeah.
They're consciously keeping a secret.
Exactly. We feel manipulated. The subconscious thought is, okay, if you're hiding something as fundamental as the cost, what else are you hiding? Are there hidden fees? Is the quality terrible? Are you going to adjust the price based on how much money you think I have?
Right, based on my zip code or my job title.
Exactly. And the moment a buyer suspects a secret, trust is entirely destroyed. And you just cannot overstate this trust is the fundamental currency of commerce. Without it, the transaction dies.
That makes total sense. Going back to our restaurant menu analogy, when I feel that suspicion, I don't lean in. I don't, ask to speak to the chef to have the value of the truffle risotto explained to me.
Right.
I just want to escape. I close the tab on the restaurant and I go search for a place that will treat me like an adult and actually show me the prices. Even if that second restaurant turns out to be incredibly expensive, I'll still choose them over the secretive place because at least I know what the rules of the game are. I just want certainty.
And that desire for certainty is what drives the digital back button. When a buyer hits that wall of frustration on a website, they do not dig deeper. They do not scour through your footer looking for some hidden PDF.
Right.
And they absolutely, under no circumstances, pick up the phone to call you for a quote, which is like the archaic behavior the business is desperately hoping for.
Yeah, nobody wants to make a phone call.
Nobody. They just leave. They bounce straight to your competitor who is actually willing to be an honest, open teacher.
The loyalty of the modern consumer always defaults to the entity that educates them the best. Period. But, I struggle with this a bit, though. Let me push back, because I talk to business owners all the time, and they view this very differently.
Oh, they fight this tooth and nail.
They really do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I am selling a highly complex, customized service, say, I don't know, a $100,000 consulting package to restructure a corporation's supply chain, if I just slap $100,000 on my homepage without any context, without understanding the client's specific pain points, aren't I just going to give them a heart attack?
That's the fear?
Yeah. Right. Don't businesses hide the price specifically so they can get the prospect on a discovery call, diagnose the problem, and explain the immense value before revealing the cost? Isn't pricing a delicate strategic dance?
I hear that all the time. But that is the textbook definition of a traditional sales mindset. And honestly, 20 years ago, it worked. The salesperson held all the cards. They were the gatekeeper of the information.
Sure.
If you wanted to know the price of a car or a piece of software or a consulting package, you literally had to engage with the salesperson. But that era is dead and buried. You cannot base your entire revenue model on the hope that your customer is ignorant.
Because they have a supercomputer in their
Yeah,
pocket.
exactly. The modern buyer is fiercely independent. The data shows that today, on average, a buyer is 70 to 80% of the way through their decision-making process before they ever reach out to contact a company.
Wow, 70 to 80%.
Think about the gravity of that. The vast majority of the sale is happening in the shadows, on their laptop at midnight, reading articles, watching videos, looking at Reddit threads.
Yeah, that's exactly how I buy things.
We all do. So if your strategy relies on hiding information so you can explain the value during a phone call, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the timeline. If you refuse to educate the buyer during that initial 70% research phase, you will never even get the chance to make your pitch.
Because they've already moved on.
Exactly. They will have silently disqualified you for being secretive long before they ever fill out a contact form.
So they don't just reject your price, they reject your entire brand ethos. They reject your lack of transparency.
Precisely.
But if hiding prices creates all this friction, and if it actively drives buyers away, why is it still the industry standard? Why are 90% of non-e-commerce businesses still operating like it's 1999?
Because of fear.
Yeah, when I talk to founders or sales directors, they usually throw up this massive wall of defense. They have these deeply ingrained, almost philosophical excuses for why they absolutely cannot talk about money online. And I really want to dig into the mechanics of these excuses because the source material we're looking at completely dismantles them.
Oh, it destroys them. They are basically the three great myths of modern marketing. And like I said, they're rooted entirely in fear, not actual strategy.
Okay, let's take the most common one I hear first. Excuse number one. We simply can't put prices on our website because every single solution we provide is custom. Every project is different. Our prices vary based on a million different factors, so it's literally impossible to give a price.
Yeah, this is the loudest and most frequent excuse. And honestly, on the surface, it sounds completely logical. If you run a custom home building company or a marketing agency or you manufacture bespoke industrial equipment, it is absolutely true that you cannot give a flat sticker price.
Right.
Every project is different. But the fatal flaw in this excuse is that it assumes the consumer is stupid.
Right. Like if I'm hiring a company to build a custom home, I am fully aware that my house is going to cost a different amount than my neighbor's house. I know that if I choose imported Italian marble for the kitchen instead of like basic laminate, the price goes up. I don't expect the builder to have a buy now button for a custom home on their website.
Exactly. The buyer doesn't expect a binding quote down to the penny. What they expect is for you to explain the mechanics of the pricing. They just want to know the variable.
They want the formula.
Exactly. If every project is different, okay, tell me why it's different. What factors drive the cost up? What choices will keep the cost down?
It's kind of like hiring a landscaping company. I know my backyard is a weird shape and I have this steep hill. I don't need a final quote yet, but I want to know, how do you charge? Is it by the square foot? Is it by the hour? Does the type of retaining wall stone drastically change the budget?
Right. Does the season matter?
Yeah. If I go to a landscaper's website and it just says, every yard is unique, contact us for a custom quote, you have taught me absolutely nothing. You've just put a hurdle in front of me. You haven't demonstrated expertise. You've just demonstrated bureaucracy.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. The goal of pricing content isn't to provide a final invoice. The goal is to provide a sense of scope and scale. It's to give the buyer a mental framework so they can start planning.
Give them the guardrails.
Yes. Give them realistic ranges. Give them the extreme low end and the extreme high end. Break down the variables. When you do that, you transform from a vendor trying to hide the ball into an industry expert teaching a masterclass on how your industry operates. You are giving the buyer the tools to understand their own budget.
It builds an insane amount of trust.
Yeah.
Because you're treating them like a partner, not a mark.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at excuse number two. And I have to be honest, this is the one that always makes me laugh because it is so steeped in corporate paranoia. If we put our prices on our public website, our competitors will find out what we charge. We can't give away our secret sauce. They're just going to undercut us.
It is entirely laughable. I mean, let's live in reality for a second. In almost every industry on the planet, pricing is not a closely guarded state secret. Your competitors already know exactly what you charge.
Of course they do. They've mystery shopped you. They've had their cousin call your sales rep. They've hired your former employees. They share mutual clients who have literally shown them your proposals. It's the most open secret in the world. Pretending your pricing is some proprietary formula is like pretending you have a secret recipe for a sandwich,
Yeah.
and everyone knows it's just Tookie and Swiss cheese.
It's ridiculous. The paranoia is completely unfounded. But let's look at the deeper tragedy of this excuse, like the actual strategic error. Let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that your competitors don't know your prices.
Okay.
By hiding your pricing from your competitors to protect this imaginary secret, you are simultaneously hiding it from your actual buyers. You are actively letting your fear of a rival company dictate how you communicate with the people who actually pay your bills.
Wow. That is such a profound shift in perspective. You are prioritizing the competition over the customer. You are punishing your best prospects because you're looking over your shoulder at a competitor who probably isn't even a threat. You are literally sacrificing your own pipeline on the altar of paranoia.
It is the definition of self-sabotage. Your competitors do not fund your payroll. Your customers do. Everything you do should be optimized for the customer's ease of use, regardless of what the competitor sees.
That brings us to excuse number 3. And this one is driven by pure sales anxiety.
Yeah.
If we show what we charge, we will scare customers away. They'll see a big number on the screen, they'll get sticker shock, and they'll run for the hills before we ever get a chance to explain the value.
This excuse reveals a fundamental, almost catastrophic misunderstanding of what actually scares people. As we established with the restaurant analogy, discussing price openly doesn't scare buyers away. Hiding the price is what scares them away. It creates suspicion.
It creates that defensive anxiety.
Exactly. But let's dive into the reality of this fear of scaring people away, because it touches on the mechanics of sales efficiency. Let's look at a hypothetical scenario. Let's say your company sells a premium, highly specialized software package that costs $50,000 a year.
Oh, 50,000.
And a prospect finds your website, and they have a hard, unyielding budget of $20,000.
Okay, so a massive mismatch right out of the gate.
Right. Now, in the traditional model, you hide the price. So this prospect, who only has 20 grand, can't find the price. But they like the features, so they fill out a form.
And then the dance begins?
Exactly. They get assigned to a sales rep. The rep spends an hour preparing for a discovery call. They have a 30-minute introductory call. They schedule a follow-up. They pull in an engineer for a massive 90-minute product demo. They spend 2 hours drafting a custom proposal. And then, 3 weeks later, they have the final presentation, and they do the grand reveal. The investment is $50,000.
And the prospect's jaw drops and they say, oh, we literally only have $20,000 in the budget. We can't do this.
Exactly. And what just happened? Hiding the price did not magically conjure an extra $30,000 out of thin air.
No.
The budget was always $20,000. All you accomplished by hiding the price was wasting everyone's time. You wasted the buyer's time, which is disrespectful. But far more importantly for the business, you just wasted 5, maybe 10 hours of your highly paid sales team's time. Time they could have spent nurturing and closing a lead who actually had $50,000.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we spend so much energy in marketing trying to attract everyone, that we completely forget we don't actually want to work with everyone.
We really don't.
We only want to work with people who are a good fit. If someone simply cannot afford your service, they are a bad fit. And a bad fit isn't a moral failing, it's just math. Allowing bad fits to disqualify themselves early by clearly seeing your pricing ranges online and realizing they don't have the budget is not a tragedy. It is a massive blessing.
It is the ultimate operational efficiency. You want to scare the bad fits away. You want them to bounce off your website and never fill out a form. Because when you embrace radical transparency, you are allowing the market to self-select. The people who read your article explaining that your software costs between $40,000 and $60,000 and still pick up the phone to call you are immensely qualified. They aren't going to suffer from sticker shock. The entire dynamic of the first sales call shifts. It's no longer an adversarial negotiation about how much is this going to cost me. It becomes a collaborative conversation about when can we start the implementation.
It protects the morale of the sales team, too. I mean, there is nothing worse than grinding for 3 weeks on a deal only to lose it over budget at the finish line.
It's soul-crushing for a rep.
Okay, so we've talked heavily about the psychological theory. We've dismantled the excuses. Now, I want to ground this in reality. I want to look at the real-world proof. Because it's one thing to talk about this in a studio. It's another to see it literally save a company. And there is no better example than the legendary $6 million article from River Pools and Spas.
Oh, this is the classic.
This is essentially the origin story of this entire philosophy.
It really is, and the context of the story is vital here. So Marcus Sheridan, who developed these concepts, he was a partner in a swimming pool installation company based in Virginia. The year was 2008. The global financial crisis hit. The housing market collapsed entirely. Credit dried up overnight.
Yeah, terrifying time.
And understandably, absolutely nobody was taking out second mortgages to buy luxury fiberglass swimming pools.
Discretionary spending went straight to zero.
Exactly. His business was on the absolute brink of bankruptcy. Sales plummeted, they were letting employees go. The company bank account was literally overdrawn for weeks at a time. It was a state of sheer desperation.
And in that crucible of desperation, he started looking really closely at his own sales process. And he realized something profound about every single conversation he had. Whenever he talked to a prospective homeowner, the very first question out of their mouth every single time was, how much does a fiberglass pool cost?
Yep, every single time.
And for years, before the crash, he'd been doing the traditional sales dance. He would evade the question. He'd say, well, it really depends on the yard. I need to come out to your house. Let me show you our beautiful brochures. Let me explain the value of our lifetime warranty.
He was acting like a protective business owner.
Right. Trying to carefully orchestrate and control the sale. He was trying to be the gatekeeper. But finally, staring down bankruptcy, he decided to stop acting like a business owner and start acting like a consumer. He realized, if I were buying a pool, I would want to know the price immediately. So he decided just answer the question publicly on his company's website.
He sat down at his kitchen table late at night and wrote a single comprehensive article titled, "How much does a fiberglass pool cost?" Now, he didn't just throw up a rigid price list, because, to be fair to that first excuse we discussed, the cost of an in-ground swimming pool genuinely does vary wildly.
You have permits, you have soil types, you have landscaping.
Exactly. So his honest answer in the article was, it depends. But then she did something unprecedented. He spent over 1,000 words explaining meticulously why it depends.
And the way he explained it is the genius part.
Yeah.
He broke it down so simply that a homeowner with zero construction experience could understand it. He explained the difference between a basic package, just dropping the fiberglass shell in the ground and leaving the yard a mess, versus a fully turnkey installation with stamped concrete patios, security fencing, electrical work, and landscaping. And to make it really click, he used an analogy that almost everyone understands.
The car buying analogy.
Yes.
It is a brilliant piece of communication. He wrote in the article that buying a swimming pool is exactly like buying a Ford F-150 pickup truck.
Perfect.
You can go to a dealership and buy the absolute base model F-150. It has manual roll-up windows, cloth seats, no towing package, and two-wheel drive. And it costs one specific price.
The bare minimum.
Right. Or you can take that exact same truck chassis and add power windows, a premium sound system, a leather interior, a heavy-duty towing package, and four-wheel drive. The base price and the fully loaded price are vastly different, even though it's technically the same truck.
And we all intuitively understand that when we buy a car, we know options cost money.
Exactly. He applied that exact same logic to swimming pools. He told his readers, a base model pool installation will typically fall in this price range. A fully loaded turnkey installation will typically fall in this much higher price range. And here are the specific accessories that drive that price up.
He didn't give them a binding, customized quote, but he gave them an absolute masterclass in education. He gave them certainty about how the market worked. Now let's look at the results. Remember, this is roughly 2009. The internet was different then, but the psychology was exactly the same. At that time, exactly 0 other pool builders in the world were willing to answer this question online.
0.
They were all hiding their prices, terrified of their competitors, terrified of giving a prospect sticker shock during a recession.
And because Marcus was literally the only person on the internet willing to honestly answer the question, search engines rewarded him massively. Google's entire algorithm is designed to find the best answer to a user's query. Almost overnight, that single article shot to the #1 ranking on Google for massive, highly trafficked search terms like, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? And cost of in-ground swimming pool.
And we're not just talking about vanity metrics here. We're not just celebrating page views or likes or social media engagement. We are talking about hard revenue. Because they use digital marketing software to track the customer journey, they could trace exactly what every buyer read before they signed a contract.
That's the amazing part.
It is. That one single article generated over 1 million visitors to his website over the years. It generated thousands of qualified leads. And they could tie that specific article to over $6 million in direct verified sales. $6 million.
From a single blog post written at a kitchen table, I mean, it
Right.
literally saved his business from bankruptcy. It saved his home. It saved the livelihoods of all his employees, all because he was willing to be honest and address the massive elephant in the room that every other company was too scared to acknowledge.
And the practical takeaway for anyone listening to this right now, whether you sell pools or roofing or coaching services, is huge. You do not have to provide an exact quote on your website. You just have to be the best, most transparent teacher in your industry about how pricing works. If you teach them, they will trust you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I think it's crucial to understand that the true enduring value of that article wasn't the SEO traffic.
Oh, yeah.
No, the SEO traffic was a byproduct. The true value was the psychological relief it provided to the buyer. Think about the emotional state of a homeowner about to spend $50,000. They are terrified of making a mistake. By the time a prospect read that comprehensive article and decided to call river pools, their shoulders had dropped. They
Mm.
were relaxed.
Because the tension of the unknown was gone.
Exactly. They already trusted Marcus deeply before he ever answered the phone because he was the only vendor who treated them with respect and didn't hide the ball.
That is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
The relief of finding an honest guide. But, I know for a fact that I can hear some of our listeners pushing back right now. I can hear the objection forming in their heads.
Yeah.
They're saying, okay, that is a fantastic, heartwarming story about swimming pools. But that is B2C. That's business to consumer. Selling to a homeowner sitting on their couch is easy. But my business is B2B. I sell complex SaaS platforms or heavy industrial manufacturing equipment or corporate cybersecurity consulting. I don't sell to individuals. I sell to procurement committees. My sales cycle isn't a weekend. It's 6 to 9 months long. This transparency stuff might work for pools, but it absolutely will not work for my complex B2B reality.
Ah, yes. My business is different. It is the ultimate defense mechanism of the B2B world. But the data completely and utterly refutes it. If you look at the client base of Impact T, which is the digital sales and marketing agency, Marcus Sheridan later founded over 50% of their clients are complex B2B organizations. We are talking highly technical, long sales cycle companies.
So not just simple transactional sales.
Not at all. And across the board, for those B2B companies, their top revenue-generating content, like the specific web pages that drive the highest volume of highly qualified, ready-to-close leads, are almost always the articles and videos about money, costs, and salary.
Which makes perfect sense when you remember one basic fact. B2B buyers are just consumers who happen to be sitting at a desk. They're human beings.
Right.
The VP of IT sourcing $1 million software system is the exact same human being who goes home at night and researches the price of a swimming pool, or gets annoyed when a restaurant menu doesn't have prices. When they badge into the office, their psychology doesn't magically change. They don't suddenly enjoy being stonewalled. They still want to know what things cost, they still want to mitigate risk, and they still get furious when a vendor hides information from them.
Exactly. The human desire for certainty doesn't vanish just because it's a corporate budget. But in the B2B space, there is a very specific, intense fear that drives the hiding of prices. And that is the fear of the cheaper competitor.
Oh, that's a big one.
Huge. B2B companies often hide their pricing because they know they charge a premium and they know there is a vendor overseas or a lower tier, lower quality domestic competitor who will aggressively undercut them on price. They feel they have to hide their premium pricing until they can get in a boardroom, do a massive presentation, and justify the cost.
But again, that logic assumes the B2B buyer is an idiot. It assumes they only look at the bottom line. If a competitor is vastly cheaper, there is always a structural reason why they're cheaper. Are they cheaper because they manufacture overseas with zero quality control? Are they cheaper because their customer support is a chatbot that never works? Are they cheaper because they strip out all the essential features and upcharge you later?
This is exactly where a B2B company has to step up and own its value. If a corporate buyer chooses the cheap option, it is rarely because they only care about price. Corporate buyers want reliability above all else. If they go with the cheap option, it is usually because the premium business completely failed to educate them on the difference in value.
Wow.
If you don't aggressively explain why you are more expensive, the buyer has no context. They have no choice but to assume you're just greedy, overcharging for the exact same commodity.
Let's look at a concrete B2B case study to prove this. Let's talk about Segway Technologies. They are a high-end, complex B2B tech company based in Washington, D.C. They build custom mobile apps and bespoke enterprise software. They were trying to expand their commercial business, and they faced this exact nightmare scenario. Custom software development is incredibly complex, very expensive, and the global market is absolutely flooded with cheap overseas developers who will promise to build an app for pennies on the dollar.
It's a hyper-competitive space. So Segway decided to lean heavily into this philosophy of transparency. They realized that the number one question their prospects were constantly asking was about cost. So they did what Marcus did. They wrote a definitive article titled, "How Much Does It Cost to Build a Mobile App?" At the time, the domestic competitors completely refused to touch this topic. It was considered taboo to talk about a $100,000 app built online.
And Segway didn't just stop at writing a great educational article. They took it a massive step further, straight into the mechanics of their sales funnel. They looked at the Contact Us form on their website, the actual digital form a prospect has to fill out to request a consultation. They had a drop-down menu on that form labeled Budget. They intentionally went in and raised the budget drop-down values. They entirely eliminated the lowest tiers.
That takes guts.
It really does. If you didn't have a certain very high baseline budget, you literally could not select it. The form essentially said, if you don't have at least X amount of dollars, we are not the right fit for you.
They actively, intentionally filtered out low-budget leads before they could even hit the CRM. They leaned fully into their premium pricing and said to the market, "We are high-end, we provide incredible quality, and here is the minimum it costs to engage with us."
Okay, let me bring in an analogy here because this is wild to me. It's like high-end real estate. If you drive through a wealthy neighborhood and you see a mansion for sale and the sign just says price upon request, it immediately tells you something. It tells you if you have to ask, you probably can't afford it. It's designed to keep the casual lookers away from the real estate agent. Segway basically put a massive price tag on the front lawn. But I have to ask, isn't that completely terrifying from a marketing perspective?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. If you're a marketing director, your entire job is to generate a high volume of leads. Purposely reducing the sheer number of leads coming in by raising your form's minimums feels like professional suicide. You are shrinking the top of your funnel on purpose.
It feels terrifying if you are operating on a traditional quantity over quality mindset. If you measure your success by just how many emails you collected, yes, it's scary. But this is actually a masterclass in sales efficiency and profitability. As we discussed earlier, time is a B2B sales team's absolute greatest asset.
Without a doubt.
If marketing gives the sales team 100 leads, but 90 of those leads literally do not have the capital to afford the services, the sales team is going to burn out. They're going to spend weeks chasing ghosts, writing proposals that go nowhere, and getting totally demoralized. Segway realized that by raising the barrier to entry, they were aggressively repelling the bad fits.
So the raw volume of leads dropped significantly, but the quality of the leads skyrocketed.
Precisely. They were generating fewer total leads, but every single lead that came through that contact form was gold. They were 100% highly qualified. They had read the article, they understood the pricing mechanics, they had the required budget, and they deeply understood Segway's premium value proposition.
That changes everything for the sales rep.
Completely. When a rep got on a call with one of these leads, the entire dynamic was different. This leads directly to vastly higher closing rates, much larger deal sizes, and a sales culture that is actually energized and happy because they aren't wasting their days on bad fits.
And the financial results for Segway speak for themselves. By answering the tough questions, explaining the variables of custom software, and aggressively filtering for quality, Segway Technologies tracked over $8 million in inbound revenue directly tied to their content marketing strategy.
$8 million.
$8 million in highly complex B2B tech sales, generated precisely because they were willing to talk about money when every other developer in town was hiding behind corporate jargon.
It is absolute undeniable proof that radical transparency wins. It doesn't matter if you're selling fiberglass swimming pools to suburban homeowners or complex custom software to enterprise corporations, the psychology of trust is universal.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground. We've looked at the psychology of the Big Five and the F word of frustration. We have dismantled the three excuses of custom solutions, competitors, and scaring people away. We've seen the massive B2C success of river pools and the huge B2B success of Segway. Now, it is time for the playbook.
Time to get practical.
Because theory is great, but execution is what makes money. We promise to give you, the listener, the exact blueprint for executing this. If you are listening to this right now, maybe you're driving or at the gym and you're realizing, wow, we completely hide our pricing and I need to fix this. What is your literal first step tomorrow morning? How do you actually do this without overwhelming your entire company?
It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It is a very straightforward, strategic, four-step process Step 1. You need to sit down and audit your offerings. You probably sell dozens or hundreds of different things. Don't try to tackle them all at once. List the major products or services your company provides that generate the most revenue. Identify your core profit centers.
The 80-20 rule. Focus on the 20% of your services that bring in 80% of your revenue. Don't get bogged down trying to write a pricing guide for some obscure, low-margin widget you sell once a year. Focus on the heavy hitters.
Exactly. Triage your offerings. Step 2. For each of those core heavy-hitting products or services, you're going to create a dedicated, comprehensive piece of content. Ideally, this should be both a long-form written article and a detailed video because people consume information differently. And the goal of this content is to explain the factors that dictate cost.
This is where you channel Marcus Sheridan and the car analogy. You have to break down the variables. Explain the base model versus the fully loaded model. What makes the price go up? What choices keep it down? If it's a consulting service, does the timeline affect the price?
Right, like, is a rush job more expensive?
Exactly. Does the seniority of the team assigned to the account affect the price? If it's manufacturing, does the raw material cost fluctuate? Lay out all the variables so the buyer can see the gears turning.
Step 3 is critical for context. You must explain the industry averages. What should a buyer expect to pay in the open market for a solution like this, given the macro view? And then, crucially, you must openly and honestly state exactly where your company falls on that spectrum.
Okay, so owning your position.
Yes. Are you the budget-friendly, high-volume option? Are you the mid-tier, reliable standard? Or are you the premium, white-glove, highest-priced service in the market? Be radically honest about who you are and why you charge what you charge.
Yes. If you are the most expensive option in town, own it. Don't apologize for it. Frame it as a strength. Say, we are generally 20% more expensive than the industry average. We know that. And here are the 3 specific reasons why our quality, our speed, and our guarantees justify that premium. Corporate buyers and consumers alike respect that level of unapologetic honesty immensely. It shows supreme confidence in your product.
And finally, step 4, visibility. This is where so many companies fail. They write a great pricing article and then they bury it on page 10 of their blog where no one will ever find it. You must add a highly visible pricing or costs tab directly to the main top-level navigation menu of your homepage. Do not hide it in a drop-down. Make it the absolute easiest thing for a frantic, researching buyer to find.
Make it impossible to miss. Put it right next to About Us and Contact. And, I want to throw in a bonus tip for this playbook, something that bridges the gap between marketing and sales. Don't just publish this content on your website and passively hope that people read it. You need to weaponize it.
Oh, this is the best part.
Start using this pricing content in your active day-to-day sales process immediately. There is a concept closely tied to this called assignment selling, and the mechanics of it are brilliant. Before a sales rep has their very first introductory meeting or discovery call with a new prospect, they should proactively email them the pricing article or video.
You literally assign it as homework. It completely changes the power dynamic. A rep might write an email that says, "Mr. Prospect, I am really looking forward to diving into your project on Tuesday. To make sure we make the absolute best use of our time together, and so we don't have to spend the first 20 minutes covering the basics, please review this short video that explains exactly how our pricing model works and what drives costs up or down. It will answer a lot of your initial questions so we can focus on your specific strategy."
Think about the psychology of that email. If the prospect watches the video, they arrive at the Zoom meeting educated, pre-qualified, and relaxed. They already know the rough numbers, so the entire conversation bypasses the awkward haggling phase, and you get straight to talking about value and implementation.
It's so much more efficient.
And conversely, if they refuse to watch it, or if they read the article and immediately realize they don't have anywhere near the budget required, they will likely cancel the meeting. And you just saved your sales rep 2 hours of wasted preparation and presentation time. It is a win-win. So bringing this all together, looking at the entire landscape we've covered, what does this all mean?
If we pull all of these threads together, the psychology, the excuses, the case studies, the playbook, the overarching insight is profound. Transparency is not just some clever marketing tactic. It's not a fleeting growth hack or a trend. Transparency is the fundamental currency of modern business.
The currency of modern business.
Exactly. We are operating in an era where information is universally accessible. Hiding information, specifically something as crucial as pricing, is a relic of a bygone era. It's a strategy based on a scarcity mindset. It assumes the buyer is captive, isolated, and uninformed.
Which, Thanks to the internet, they never ever are anymore.
Exactly. When a business makes the conscious decision to obsess over honest education, when they decide to treat their buyers' questions with profound respect, especially the uncomfortable, scary questions about money and cost, a massive paradigm shift happens. The company stops being viewed as a self-serving entity trying to quickly close a deal, and they elevate themselves to the status of a trusted advisor. They become the teacher.
And as we established at the very beginning of this deep dive, human loyalty always goes to the teacher. The business that is willing to stand up and answer the questions that everyone else in their industry is terrified of or hiding from inherently becomes the undisputed voice of authority. When you are the only one answering the difficult questions, you aren't just winning a single sale. You are defining the entire conversation for the marketplace.
You are setting the standard. You dictate the terms, and everyone else just becomes a rule follower trying to catch up to your level of trust.
Now, as we wrap up, I want to circle back to where we started. I want you to remember that visceral feeling of holding your credit card, staring at a gorgeous website, and feeling that sharp spike of frustration and anxiety because they are hiding the price from you. You know that feeling intimately. Your buyers know that feeling intimately, so stop inflicting it on them. Be the relief they are desperately looking for online. Be the honest teacher, because as we've seen today, embracing that transparency isn't just the right thing to do, it is the single most profitable shift in mindset a business can possibly make.
It really is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible power of pricing transparency and the Big Five. But I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over. Now that you have tackled the scariest topic in business, your prices. What happens when you are forced to talk about the absolute worst parts of your product? What happens when you intentionally put a massive spotlight on your own flaws? Next time, we will explore why openly broadcasting your company's biggest weaknesses and failures might actually be the greatest, most counterintuitive sales strategy you ever deploy. Until then, stay curious.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.